I cut my hair last night. I think I cut too much off. I think I cut too much off of my hair. I was trying to like trim my hair, but I think I cut a lot of it off. Good morning, Badger. How you doing, babes? Hi, Bobs. Hi, Bobs. How you doing, Bobs? Well, thank you. You can't cut too much hair when you're an old lady, okay? You can't do that, because that is not, your hair is not going to play. Not gonna play. Teresa! I love that you're here. I love that you're here. I gotta pour some coffee. I'm just running on, I'm running this morning. You ever have one of those mornings where you're like, you get up, you're at least 20 minutes behind. Maybe 10. Let's be nice. 10 minutes behind. I'm 10 minutes behind. Cheers. Here's to you. Here's to all of you. My friend has not forgiven me. I warned her. Oh, God, why is that such heavenly shit? I gotta check our description because I think there's something there. It's not a. Well, it's a Brookings Institute thing. Let me see what time it's at. Hold on. Shit, I can't even like function. What am I doing? I'm pulling up internet. You have a lot of those. Okay. Yeah, I have no excuse to have a running morning. I don't have anybody to get anywhere or do anything, but yet I still can't handle myself. And I've got like, I have psoriasis, like psoriatic arthritis. So my skin sometimes goes absolutely insane. And it's like my chin right now I have like a psoriasis issue with my chin. I know this is too much, but it's just really annoying. And I can't like it like makes me self-conscious, you know what I mean? Hi, Gimme Coffee. How are you? Good to see you. Anyway, that's my vlog moment with you. I'm vlogging. Lecithin, it's like this is like it's like an autoimmune response to whatever is in my, like whatever I might have going. And like it just exacerbates one area. I don't know. It's a weird. I can't stand this fucking disease. Um, but I don't know. I just like I need it to go away. It's making me very self-conscious. Anyway, and I don't want to. Oh wait, EU leaders and having a. Oh wait, hold on. I'm gonna hold us on this because EU leaders and Zelensky are having a joint press conference. It looks like. I'll just hold that. But I also know that there's a briefing from Brookings Institute about the war, and Fiona Hill was on the briefing, and I thought, oh, I really want to hear her right now. Is that who I'm? No, I didn't mean like Fiona Apple, Fiona Hill. Hold on, let me find out what I meant. What did I mean? What did I mean? Oh wait, what's this? Wait, birthright citizenship is today? I thought that was Thursday. Okay. Everybody's freaking me out. You're freaking me out. You're freaking me out. All right, where? Oh wait, I'm looking at me. I'm looking at you, kid. Hi, Neil. How you doing? Neil. Listen, damn it. Neil. We were trying to reach you last night. And you didn't listen to us. You didn't listen. Wait, let me see this. Where is this? Fiona Hill, Ben Winnis. Wait, where's my fucking... Oh man, I didn't even put the link on there. Okay, hold on. Brookings Institute. Oh, Fiona. Okay, wait, hold on. I'm gonna get us set up here, Bibs. Hold on. Hold on, Bebs. Hey, Bubs. Hold on. Hey, Bubs. You were watching curling? Oh, that's fun. That's a lot of fun. Curling's fun. Curling sounds fun. All right. Oh, shit. Come on. Ah! No. Fucker, you're a little fucker, yeah, you're. You're a little fucker, yeah, you're. Oh, yeah, my checkbox isn't. Everything's wrong this morning. Believe me. Believe me, everything is wrong. Everything. I woke up to mayhem, I tell you, mayhem. All right, let me get this press conference on here. Shit. All right. Come on. Come on, come on. What are you doing? Come on. Come on, what are you doing? EU leaders. Okay, fine. Is that it? Yeah. No. If this is in, I hope they translate. And I hope it's not bad translators. Because we've had some bad translation once in a while. Oops, let me move this. I am just so woefully unready. What were you up for? Basically all more. Wait. What happened yesterday that I ignored and neglected? Well, impromptu, I said in Discord, I want to watch The Stand now. And was like, I have The Stand. Wait, what's this? Oh, I see, it's music. I get it.
So, ladies and gentlemen, dear members of the press, we welcome you at this press conference following the Support Ukraine Summit in Kiev that gathered 42 leaders. And please welcome President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky.
There's Ursula.
President of Finland, Alexander Stubb.
Love her.
President of Latvia, Edgars Rinkēvičs. President of Lithuania, Gitanas Nausėda. President of the European Council, Antonio Costa. President of the European
I missed your
Commission,
3
Ursula von der
anniversary.
Leyen.
Oh, I didn't sleep Friday night, so on Saturday I passed out at 7ish and didn't. Oh, butterflies.
Mette Frederiksen.
You're so
Prime
sweet.
Minister of Estonia, Kristen Michal.
Wow, there's a lot
Prime
of people
Minister
there.
of Iceland, Kristrún
I gotta find our
Frostadóttir.
other thing. Hold on.
Prime Minister of Norway, Jonas Gahr Støre. Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez. Prime Minister of Sweden, Ulf Kristersson.
This is everybody.
So we will begin with our
Oh, look,
opening
there's
remarks.
Canada.
I think it's the greatest show of unity and freedom in this city that we have certain leaders speaking to the press together. And let's start without further
This is great.
delay.
This is a great press conference.
We have Euronews with us, right? Okay, I see you. In the middle. So please everyone stand up when you ask your questions, get the microphone and go.
Hello. Can you hear me? Yes. Hello, everybody. My question is addressed to President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. You have spent the last 3 years building an unprecedented sanctions regime against Russia, really, and you have promised time and time again to make Russia pay for its aggression. But now the United States is asking Europe to leave sanctions as part of a potential peace agreement. In fact, the US is saying that Europe will be invited to the table only when it comes to sanctions relief. Are you willing to do that just because the White House tells you so?
Fuck no. Tell him, girl.
Imposed on the Kremlin to do that.
Tell him,
And
girl.
Just a quick question for President Zelensky. Do you think Russia deserves any sort of relief after the untold devastation it has brought upon your country? Thank you so much.
So what the sanctions question is concerned, what we see is that the sanctions already have a massive effect on the Russian economy. There are skyrocketing inflation, there is spiraling interest rates, so the effect is visible. Companies are leaving
The
Russia.
audio is like it is on every
The
stream.
they're really grinding sanctions and biting sanctions. These sanctions are part of our approach that we want peace through strength. And it's very clear that unless Russia demonstrates by facts the true willingness to achieve a lasting and just peace agreement, we will increase punitive sanctions against Russia. So the precondition is first we have to see that there's action on the side of Russia towards a just and lasting peace agreement. Presently, there is no lasting peace agreement, so it is much too early to speak about anything of potentially maintaining or increasing or lifting sanctions. This discussion can only be led after we've seen concrete steps on the Russian side.
Thank you very much. You know, well, we are very often, and also today we speak that we need just lasting peace. When we speak about the just, and this war, it's difficult to find just in this war because of such steps of Russia. Their war, their way of this war, how many people they killed, just killed them, and thousands in the prison, and stolen children. And that's why we'll never forget it. And we can't forget it. And even if I hope that our partners on the same page with us, and not only hope I see it, but we'll never forget it, and we will really do everything that people who began this war, who unprovoked war, all these people, yes, really will answer, and of course we will work on tribunal even after the hard part of this war. Even when we will go to the diplomacy, we'll never forget these surnames and these people.
Let's now go to Italian media. La Stampa, you're with us. Yeah, I see you. Go on.
Thank you very much. Marco Bresolin, Italian newspaper La Stampa. I have a question for the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa. You represent 27 EU member states. You said, you repeated that EU wants to be at the table when peace talks will start. You also said that maybe you are going to find someone who will represent the EU. But here there are many other representatives of other European non-EU countries. Some others intervene by video. Do you think that this seat should belong to the EU, or are you ready to share a common seat with other European leaders in order to bring a European position at the peace talks negotiation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, only Ukraine can decide when there are conditions to start effective, credible, and sustainable peace negotiations. All of us welcome the huge efforts from President Trump to push Putin and Russia to negotiation, and I wish that these bilateral talks open the door for a really peace negotiation. But only Ukraine can decide when.
Stop being nice.
To do this. But this war is not only about Ukraine, it's also about European security. And for this, it is essential that Europe, as present in the negotiations,
I'm not sure.
and
Fuck.
participate in negotiations. Not only the European Union, also our friends like Norway, Iceland, United Kingdom, because all of them are very engaged in the support of Ukraine, and they are very concerned about European security. Then I believe that if we reach to have a joint special envoy representing not only the European Union but also the other European countries, we strengthen our European position, and we will discuss this.
That's a good idea. Send Ursula.
In the next European Council.
Send Ursula.
On the 6th of March, that I yesterday invited the leaders to participate. And this special European Council is about how to strengthen our capacity to invest more, better, faster and stronger in our own capabilities, how to strengthen the Ukrainian capacity, but also how we can be prepared for participate actively in the future peace negotiations if and when they arise. Thank you.
Thank you. Next one to Danish Danish media, Mathilde Kimmer from the R. Yeah.
Yes. My question is to the Danish Prime Minister. Today you presented this willingness to support the Scandinavian and the Baltic countries to support the newly established brigade, Ukrainian brigade. But where are you on the question of boots on the ground in a potential European peacekeeping mission?
Thank you for that question. Well, from a Danish perspective, we are open-minded, and as I have said from the beginning of this war, we will be with our friends in Ukraine as long as it takes and to the end. I think for now, the most important thing is to ensure that Ukraine will get what they need on the ground. And therefore I urge everyone to contribute more on donations, weapons, air defense, things we have discussed for several months and years now. I think that's the most important thing. And of course, a lot of questions has to be answered before we can take
You gotta love those Danes, man. They cut through the bullshit.
And as Antonio Costa just said, this war is about Ukraine and it's also about European security. And therefore we need to look at the entire eastern flank when it comes to deterrence and defense. But we are open-minded.
Thank you. Delphi Media, Herman Kelovis. Delphi, yeah.
Hello, Herman Kelovis from Delphi in Estonia. In my country, it is a day with a double meaning. We have our Independence Day, so my question is to President Zelensky and Prime Minister Michal. Should there be an unjust peace in Ukraine? Do you think Estonia's independence could be threatened, and how soon?
Thank you. It's your birthday. Yeah, it's Estonia's birthday today, 107. The short answer probably would be that all of EU and NATO are under threat if Russia's and Putin's goals and objectives will not be changed. A longer one probably is that Estonia knows its neighbor well, as everybody does. We have invested in defense for many years, and we will. Our aim is to go to 5%
This new administration is actually causing a war.
Already.
Yeah.
And we know that independence is invaluable. That's why I'm here, not in Estonia celebrating Estonia's birthday. To support
Oh, Lee,
Ukraine,
good morning.
because we have the common enemy.
I'm sorry, I don't want it to be an unhappy Monday.
Also for Europe and Nordics and Baltics, everybody. So to answer the question, the unjust peace probably would hit everybody, also United States, because Iran, North Korea, everybody would assess that they can do whatever they want. So everybody in this probably are together. And to EU and everybody, just a thought.
Hey, Just Dan, it's so good to see you here. Welcome.
Right now.
So glad you're here.
There are more than it was before the war. What will they do? Will they become physical education teachers? Probably not. They will find new jobs. So this is a threat all over the world. Before the war it was called boundaries, whatever they were called. But right now it's somewhat different. So to conclude, the European Union, NATO, everybody in civilized and democratic world are under the threat until Russia is forced to change its goals. Thank you.
Again, my congratulations to you, your country, your people. That we are very proud that today you are here in such a special day. Thank you so much, and my congratulations, and God bless. You'll never have a war. And what is very important, I think in risk answering your question, yes, all the countries which been before 1990, 1991, which been under Russian influence. Yeah, so I think Russia, first of all, wants to have their influence continue and be present on these territories of these independent countries which been before, during Soviet period, being the republics of Soviet Union, and of course it's Ukraine and Moldova, of course Estonia, Litva, Latvia, And of course, where their influence was very strong during the 20th centuries, it's Poland, Slovak, and other countries. So the most dangerous moment when you have people who has Russian roots, it's not bad. And just how it was with Crimea, I'm just sharing with you our experience. When you have some society, and of course, if you are bordering with Russia, you have such society. I mean, it's with other nations, it's the same. So when you have Russian-speaking people, or their roots, or their families, which half of Estonian, half Russian, like we had Ukrainian, father Ukrainian, and Russian mother, it can be so. It's our history very long. I mean, you are in risk, because it was with Crimea, it was with the East, with Donbass at the very beginning. They said that they are not occupying our territory, that they defend Russian-speaking people. That's why I think that Estonian people have these risks if we will fall down Ukraine. I think all such countries who I mentioned, I think have this risk because of Russian policy, because their view of the world, Russian world.
Thank you, Mr. President. And
Well
we now
said.
go to Iceland, Dagny Erlendsdottir from
That is really
Iceland
well
National
said.
Broadcaster, please.
I have a question for the Prime Minister of Iceland, Kristrún Frostadóttir. Your government has decided to increase funding to help Ukraine. On what projects will that be spent?
Thank you. Yeah, so this is, we're obviously very much aware of our geographical situation in the world. And even though we might be a small country, we think it's very important that we show through direct action, not just with words, that we're stepping up. We are a country without a military, but we are a country that has high welfare because we have security. And I think there's increased understanding that defense for peace in Europe is extremely important. So we're making this step of doubling our contributions when it comes to defense for Ukraine. And our hope is that we will mostly use these funds to go through the Danish initiative, which we know has been very effective, both financially and for the Ukraine, but also through our demining efforts that we've worked on with Lithuania. So that will be our chief focus. But then we are also obviously supporters through the MB8 of the brigade. We don't have arms or a military, but we will be financially supporting that. So this is an important step for Iceland to take. And like I said before, important to show solidarity with Ukraine.
Thank you, Excellency. Let's go now to Canada. Marie-Ève Bédard from Radio Canada.
Hi, good afternoon. If you'll indulge me 1 second, je vais commencer en français. Monsieur le Premier ministre, avec vous, vous avez parlé plus tôt ce matin de la volonté du Canada de collaborer avec les partenaires européens dans le cas où la paix sera atteinte. Est-ce que ça veut dire pour vous des soldats? I'll translate very quickly. Did you mean this morning that Canada was willing to send boots on the ground should there be peace to cooperate with European allies to guarantee Ukraine's security? And if I may, a question for both of you, President Zelensky and Prime Minister Trudeau. How significant and important is it to have a North American ally at this table now, given the fact that in the past month, both of you have had conversations that sounded like they came from an adversary with the United States and its President, Donald Trump? What's the significance of Canada's presence here today?
Hi, Paul J.
First of all, Canada has been there for Ukraine from day one, indeed from before day one, as in 2015 we started training Ukrainian military forces on the ground in Ukraine, which was a significant part. Western training to the Ukrainian armed forces is one of the reasons why Ukraine has been able to stand up to
You're the news
Russian
guy, Neil. You tell me.
so effectively over the past years. It's not just Canada, a number of countries have been involved. But for historical reasons, Canada having the second largest
Hey,
diaspora of
Pepper.
Ukrainians in the world, means that we felt deeply connected to Ukraine, but we also believe deeply that it's not just about Ukraine. It's about the rules and the values and the principles of sovereignty, of independence, of territorial integrity that protects every country in the world. All of us rely on those rules to be able to build peace and security. And we know that with the world changing, we're all going to have to do more around peace and security. One of the key themes that we heard today, as we've heard from many, many partners around the world in NATO and elsewhere over the past number of years, is people are going to be doing more on defense. 9.5 years ago, when I took office in Canada, the previous government had us down below 1%
I agree,
of
Dan.
defense spending, even though the NATO 2% pledge had been made a year or two before. In the subsequent time, we have more than tripled defense spending on the path to 2030, and we're on our way to 2%. And we know we're going to have to continue to do more and more in an uncertain world, and Canada will be there. As to how we will be there, we will work with our neighbors on it, but everything is on the table because we need to make sure that might no longer makes right in this world. That's what has led to 80 years of incredible stability and prosperity, not just in Europe, but around the world, because of the institutions we built out of the ashes of World War II. And standing up for those institutions is in the best interest of every single one of us. Now, as a collection of different nations, we will have different perspectives from time to time on the best way forward, and those will be worked out in forums like this, or the G7 forum, or elsewhere. But we are united in our values. We are united in wanting to see peace and fairness and prosperity for all our citizens, and that's what continues to drive us forward. Le Canada va toujours être là pour l'Ukraine. On est là depuis le début. On va continuer de l'être et on regardera comment on peut mieux aider dans les années à venir, parce que défendre l'Ukraine, c'est pas juste défendre l'Ukraine, c'est défendre les principes et les valeurs qui nous protègent tous.
Merci à vous. Victor Guerrero, Televisión Española. Ah, sorry.
Really, it was a pleasure.
That's okay. No, he can tell us how much he likes Canada.
I love Canada. And I really appreciate that we have such relations with you, Justin. And you helped a lot, and a lot of your people helped us at the very beginning. We never shared, by the way, that we've been in touch, and really at the very beginning of the war, we didn't have really huge technologies with drones and etc. When we began producing drones, and even when we bought drones with some partners, they didn't have Canadian high-level optic technologies, and Canada helped us with this, and we spoke a lot of this, and we had this, and we began to helped our guys on the front line, on the battlefield, with these drones and etc. It was really first weeks and first months of the first year of war. Then, Justin, absolutely right about training missions. Really, the part of our army was prepared by Canadian officers, instructors. But what is very important, and it was very important again the first year, because they've been well trained. For today, the situation changed. After that, after Canada, we had such missions in Europe, in different countries, and then so the experience of this war gave us new knowledge of the war, and of course today when we trained abroad, we have to come back and train again on the battlefield, because the war is changing. It's technological war. That's why. But we really appreciate for your help and packages, military packages. So thank you so much. And I think that's all. Yes. With Donald Trump. This is, by the way, this is question to you, to Canada. And I mean, that's. Well, with Donald Trump, now we had a conversation. It was very good conversation, G7 conversation with the leading role of Canada. Yes, thank you very much, Justin, for organizing this meeting. Everybody been there, and we spoke about it, and we hope that United States will continue support, like all the partners. All the partners do it, and we need also not to lose this unity between Europe and United States. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we can proceed to Victor, finally, to you. Where is the Spanish media? Yes.
Hola. This is a question for Pedro Sánchez, Spanish Prime Minister, and also for President Zelensky. First in Spanish, then I will translate in English. Señor Presidente, usted esta mañana decía que España va a apoyar a Ucrania el tiempo que haga falta y con mayor determinación. España o su gobierno está valorando o podría valorar enviar soldados dentro de una fuerza de paz o en otro formato. Prime Minister, you said this morning that Spain would be supporting Ukraine as long as it takes and with more determination. Is the Spanish government considering or could consider it to send Spanish audience as a
didn't know that, Jim.
peacekeeping force in Ukraine? And for President Zelensky, are you asking your partners here present for soldiers for a peacekeeping force as a peace guarantee?
Ursula, I want.
And how many soldiers do you think would be?
She has a terrible poker face.
Thank you, Victor, for your question. I would say, because this is not the first time that I have to answer to this question, and I guess all the rest of colleagues, but I would say that first things first, and step by step. No, I think that now we're focused on what we are, which is to open a genuine peace.
I didn't know I was off camera, you guys. I'm sorry.
And for that
God, man, I'm already too high.
That Ukraine and of course Europe are implicated in the negotiation process. Second, I think it's critical for all of us to provide the security guarantees to Ukraine in order to reach that common goal that we have, which is to have a last and just peace for Ukraine and for Europe. So I think these are now the questions.
Yeah, I like that. I choose Jesus.
And we welcome, of course, this opportunity that now we have in order to speak about peace. But as I said before, I think it's important that to have the European Union and, of course, Ukraine implicated in these very important talks. And as I said during this morning, of course, in 2024, Spain signed a very important bilateral security agreement with Ukraine that will last for the next 10 years. Last year, we provide 1 billion euros in order to provide military capabilities to Ukraine. This is something that we are going to repeat in the year 2025, and of course we are we stand with Ukraine and of course with President Zelensky.
Thank you so much. We're very thankful to you, Pedro, your country, your team, and your people. We had, I think, the most.
I think it's temporary too. I think we're gonna come to our senses.
3 winters.
I don't know.
Blackouts and etc. Now we're sitting in the middle of the winter. We have light, we have connection, we have internet, we have possibility to speak, and our people have electricity, and we see each other. That's good, very good. But this is the big work of a lot of partners. For example, I don't know if I can share when I came to Spain in a very difficult moment, again in winter, and Pedro made a decision with I don't know if I can say number of hawks, I don't know. 6. It was decision I needed very much because we knew that they will attack very specific infrastructure of energy, and we needed very much 10 very quickly, I had to find very quickly 10 systems and through the world. And immediately Pedro gave me 6 hawks and it helped. So thank you so much. And such things, this is illustration of our unity. And again, it means that we can trust each other and we count on each other, and we are very thankful. And I'm very thankful, like President of our nation, to all your nations, and this is very important. I think the same thing we will discuss now. It's not for public because we didn't make a decision about the contingents and infrastructure for security guarantees. We are contingents or troops, how you say, or soldiers, like the journalist said. So we will discuss this infrastructure. The number, so of course I know the number what we need, and of course we will share it firstly, not in the open conversation. Yes, not to prepare Russians for this, and so we will discuss and then we will make decision of what we see, how we see the number, and if it will be positive, we will share it. Of course we will share it. It's not a secret. It can't be without support of societies. Thank you.
Thank you. Now to Swedish media, Svenska Dagbladet. Yeah, we have Swedish media with us. Okay, they probably left.
They're at the bar.
Until now, yes.
Damn Swedes.
Okay, let's go on to Norway then, another Nordic nation. Marius Helge Larsen. Okay, please begin you.
Hi, I'm Marius Larsen from the Norwegian news agency NTV. I have a question for President Zelensky or anyone else who would like to answer it. You have now been through...
Can you ask Sweden, please, because they don't have journalists.
President Zelensky, Sweden, and anyone else.
Sweden, Zelensky, or anyone else, or my Prime Minister, who hasn't gotten any questions yet. So, but it goes to you first, President Zelensky. You have been through 3 terrible years of war. What are your hopes
Paul.
for Ukraine and the Ukrainian people for the next 3 years to come?
We hope that we can finish this war this year, not in 3 years. It's very, very difficult. Very difficult for all our nation to go through this war, but with all respect to our soldiers and our people. So I can't speak about 3 years. If we speak about how to prepare security because of the Russia, they can come back in 10 years if we will not be prepared. They will not come back if we will prepare them, put them to their place, to their territory, and if Ukraine will be in EU and in NATO in closest years.
I grew up in the South Bay.
Help us very much. And I think that they will not come back if we will have strong army and strong allies and strong unity, to my mind, because they will never, forgive the world that they didn't win.
I agree, Cash.
And you see that they will not win. Thank you. And what about Sweden?
Oh,
Yes,
Skyline. Oh my gosh, that was a cool high school.
If not, we will proceed. No? I think everything was so clear.
I have a question for my Prime Minister as well, Jonas Gahr Støre. Today your colleague Mette Frederiksen in Denmark said that 3% of the budget to defense is not enough. You have set a goal to reach 3% within 2036. Do you think that is a fast enough pace?
Well, I think we have made that significant shift of lifting.
Is their Starlink operational?
First, we were among countries that
Thank
did
you,
not have a
butterflies.
plan. Then we had a plan. Then we moved beyond. We are now about 2.5, and we may reach 3% before 2036. By the way, I think we may need to invest more in defense, and I think that debate should be on figures, but also on quality and capabilities. Because if we get lost in figures, we will have 32 allies with
Reform
silos
UK. I gotta look at
and
that.
percentages. What we need to do now is to deliver on what we have agreed at NATO
in Vilnius and in Washington about regional plans. So we work now with Sweden and Finland in the north of the Nordic region to make sense of our capabilities in defending the Nordic part of the Nordic region. And we debate with our Danish friends and our German friends and our British friends that around the North Sea we should also have investment in the best capabilities. That may also lift percentage, but I would really like to see the output as the most important.
Thanks.
Thank you. Let's go now to Finnish media. We have with us Jonas Imonen from Ilta-Sanomat, right? Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. Jonas Imonen from Ilta-Sanomat, Finland. Question for President Stubb and Mr. Zelensky. Mr. Stubb, you said earlier today that there are now mixed messages and signals coming from the US in support of Ukraine and also defense of Europe as a whole. Mr. Stubb, what do you think that's going to be Finnish role and responsibility for future for European defense? And Mr. Zelensky, do you think or believe that Europe will and should be able to replace US support if needed?
Sure. Perhaps I'll answer through 2 points. I'll answer.
Well, someone should. No, I'm just kidding.
First. I think we need to get our facts right. When you look at support for Ukraine throughout this war, Europe stands, as Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said earlier, at about 134
SB, I'm sorry.
euros, more or less. The United States, roughly around 114 billion. I look around this table and I see NBA, so 5 Nordic countries and 3 Baltic states. We're actually at 26 billion euros, roughly speaking. So that's about a fifth of what Europe has supported. So yes, to a certain extent in the future, we're going to have to take more responsibility, but to get bogged down in who has given more, I think is the wrong tack. The second point I have to make, it's not only about the material support, it's also about having skin in the game or having some kind of a plan.
Oh, that
I
will,
think
Neil.
Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre put it quite well earlier when he said that we Europeans can't complain our way to the negotiating table. And my worry is that in the past 2 weeks, when we've seen a shift in the transatlantic partnership, and you'll know that I'm an avid transatlanticist, we have to wake up to a new reality. And then the question is, how do we get skin in the game? How do we get involved?
Oh, God, Max, you're making me hungry.
Is what President Costa has done, is to call a European Council. Because right now, European diplomacy is rather cacophonic. It's all over the place. That's why I have
Hey, don't you talk about Ursula that way. I love her so much.
That we sit down and think about a plan. And in my mind, that plan or sketch goes in 3 phases. The first phase is the pre-negotiation. That's where we are right now. This is when we have to think really hard how we put more pressure on Russia and basically how we support Vladimir and Ukraine and what kind of security arrangements
Oh,
we
God,
have.
I
And if
love
may
when
just
it's a
side
Polish
note,
neighborhood.
I'm getting a
Oh,
little
my
bit
God, the
frustrated about
food
this
is so
debate on
good.
boots on the ground, because that sort of
Everyone
misses
better
the
love
point.
pierogies.
That is that the strongest boots on the ground in the world right now are with Ukraine. They have the land forces. Then it's a question about which phase and how Europe will come to support Ukraine. In the air, in the sea, with reconnaissance, with intelligence, etc., etc. The second phase of the plan is when the ceasefire begins. And that's actually quite crucial, because that's when you start looking at the modalities and the agenda of the actual negotiations. And that's when you start looking at confidence-building measures. And then the third phase is the peace process. And that's when you start talking about the big issues of territory, and that's when you start talking basically about recompensation, about justice, which President Zelensky was talking about earlier. So what I'm trying to say is that I think we in Europe, we need to get our act together. And in order to get an act together, you have to have a plan to the Americans.
God, stop it, you guys. I'm starving now.
The negotiations. And right now the negotiations are happening above our heads
Oh,
without any kind
Jane.
of a plan and strategy. That's why I think this meeting
Off with your head if you don't.
and that's why I think the next 2 weeks are crucial also about the future of European security.
And the
Just as on words, I think that you are sorry that I'm telling, but
I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about gumbo. I've been seeing like all these gumbo
That's
recipes.
great. So that's big success that you are in NATO. And my congratulations to Sweden. And also, that's why, so we are very thankful that we have such close partnership with Finland, with Alexander. And
I'm
of
intrigued.
course, you gave us a lot of packages during this war. And it was very important, useful. I can tell you, especially, by the way, first year, I'm focusing a lot of times on the first year, but I think that the first year, first months, was the most important. The most important in this battle. And when those times we didn't have 155 artillery, I mean Western kind of NATO standard systems of artillery. We didn't have long distance weapon and etc. We had Ukrainian production, Soviet period production, any weapon, artillery and etc. And their air defense S-300, for example, missiles. And it was very difficult. It was big deficit because big deficit in the world. And Finland helped us very much. Because really we found only some countries who had it in their storages. Yeah, so it was very important, especially those months, those first weeks and months. And about your neighbor, and I think, and of course, Ukraine will be always thankful for this and never forget it. And I think those experience of such enemies or such problematic neighboring, how to save the border, and you have very long border with Russia, and that's why I think our experience of how to defend the contact line or defend the front line, and the same technologies how to defend the border. I think this experience, our experience, will be very useful for your country. It doesn't mean that you will have a war, but it's more safety. I think so.
Thank you.
Kim.
We have another question
Oh,
to
hi,
Prime Minister
Kim.
Kristersson from
I'm glad you're here.
Forum. Yes, floor is yours.
We're talking about it all. Give me coffee.
Басова, Укрінформ, запитання до прем'єр-міністра Швеції і до президента України. Скажіть, будь ласка, зараз активно...
Скажи мені.
Будь ласка.
I can put my question in English, actually. Today, President Nauseda stepped with the initiative for Ukraine to become a member of EU by 1st of January of 2030. And do you support such initiative? Because we need a coalition of leaders who will support our way for EU. І запитання до президента Зеленського. Пане президенте, скажіть, будь ласка, чи готова Україна ще більше пришвидшити реформи заради євроінтеграції?
Well, for me, okay, yeah, sure. Well, obviously we have we have the phrase of a merit-based process, and since there are a lot of merits, there is a good reason for speediness in the process. So that's very easy. And I really wouldn't mind to have a very specific date. I think there is an urgency in becoming a European Union member, and even more so if there is put at doubt whether Ukraine will be allowed into NATO for every country. So I think the European Union accession is an urgent need.
I think so that how to open clusters quickly on the way to EU and what we have to do for this. I think all the answers can give you really the President Ursula von der Leyen. She knows she and President Costa, I think they know when we will be in EU.
Yeah, Ursula knows.
Decision makers. So.
Yeah, but perhaps I may add, I'm now witnessing many different accession processes. I must say, I'm so deeply impressed by the speed and the quality with which this country, Ukraine, is reforming and doing all the necessary steps, and these are hard steps. and this is a lot of hard work. While
I fucking love this woman
fighting a
so
war
much.
of survival is really impressive. So you have here an example for highest merit, highest quality, and speedy delivery that is exemplary.
Fuck yeah.
You got 3. So now we go to Latvia. Latvian media, Latvian television, Gins Amoriņš.
Thanks. Hello.
Oh, that sounds so good, James.
Works well.
You guys have the best food ideas.
Baltic states, my question would be to President of Latvia, President Rinkević, and maybe a short comment on that from President Zelensky, if possible. Shortly about the Nordics and Baltics announced today, the pledge to train and also to equip a brigade-sized unit. Given the uncertain situation right now in geopolitics, and a bit of a follow-up with the Finnish colleague here, do you see that Europe would need to rapidly increase its military aid to Ukraine? And is Europe capable of doing that? Thank you.
Actually, those are very easy questions. Yes and yes.
Max.
But I think that for the second, what we really need is to, first of all, get a very clear message to the defense industry that we are going to spend more. Because what defense industry needs, a clear commitment. Number 2, both on the national level, less of the European level, we still are experiencing all those procedures. Sorry to say, but I think that we need to get out of this kind of mode that we are very much process-oriented, but to move to the results-oriented. I do believe that we can do that, and I do believe that we must do that, and I do believe that we will do that.
Okay, let's go now to listen.
I think so that all the defense or military industries of European countries began to increase the production because of this war. Began to increase the production, beginning from the artillery rounds to drone production, technologies, systems of electronic warfare. There are a lot of things, different things, but how to do, but it's not enough, and how to increase more quick and be comparable with Russians is to invest more to Ukrainian production. Because our economy, we have military economy for today. We just produce, for example, like drones, we have 200 private companies, 200, it's a lot. Even small companies, they need financing and they produce quicker than our government production. It's understandable because without any bureaucracy, they just produce and help soldiers. And by the way, they help directly to the front line. What is important, they don't produce and just to give government, and then government think how to send it to the front line. So there are a lot of quick ways. For example, we did one thing. So I began to pay money directly to brigades. It's one of the versions, how to help them to produce quickly. And they really do a lot of things. And they buy and produce. There are brigades on the front line which produce at the same time. So really very sorry if I'm using not correct word, interesting, but it's incredible. So that's why we need additional financing for our Ukrainian production directly to private sector.
Now to Lithuanian media, LRT, Augustinas.
Thank you for opportunity. Question for Lithuanian President. I also would like to ask you about, peacekeeping force possibilities in Ukraine. We see that it's hardly likely that anytime soon we can see this coming from EU or NATO frame. Are you willing to take a unilateral decision, like for example, United Kingdom is talking about? And also I want to ask President Zelensky, looking around you today, around this table, do you think that this Nordic-Baltic region is playing more and more significant role in support for Ukraine? Thanks.
Lithuania is ready and will be ready to support Ukraine on under
That guy
any
is a party animal. I'm going to tell you that right now.
And even now, as we speak,
This guy is a
Lithuanian
party fucking
people,
animal.
ordinary Lithuanian
Period.
people are accumulating financial resources in order to buy the drones for Ukraine. So my country is not tired and will be not tired in supporting Ukraine. When it comes to the decision you mentioned, I think we have to answer to the three questions, first of all. We need the clarity about the mandate of such forces on the soil of Ukraine. Are we speaking of peacekeeping or peace enforcement?
Jane, what an incredible
There is no
story.
peace yet, and even the ceasefire is not the reality, unfortunately, so far. The second question, and the answer to the second question is, are we ready to enforce the ceasefire? So the force must be real. The first time the peace is violated or ceasefire is violated, the retaliation must be immediate and strong. Otherwise, we compromise and we discredit the very concept of the security guarantees. And the third question is, are we ready to back each other? Or, in other words, unity is vital. Europeans with the backing of the United States would be ideal solution. Are we there? I have my doubts. Maybe my doubts will disappear in the coming weeks or coming months. At least I'm looking forward to the Hague summit. I hope there will be positive news from this summit despite all our reservations. So I think the question is a little bit too premature, but when it comes to the training mission, Lithuania is already there. Our experts, military experts,
These small countries doing shit is amazing. Check out the video coming from the Department for Housing. Oh, okay. And Urban Development.
we already answered to this
Oh,
question
wow.
positively. And if you allow me, I will comment
Quarter but arugula dough is easy to make. Quarter butter, quarter cream cheese, quarter or half flour.
Union accession,
Oh.
Ukraine's accession into European Union. You know, this is a matter of political commitment.
Yes, exactly. It's all Polish comfort food. I'm sorry, SB, you can't hear.
Not everything is in our hands, and the decision depends on other allies too. But the European Union membership is in our hands, in the hands of European Commission, in the hands of member state, and of course the hands of Ukraine. And Ukraine is doing really great job under such complicated circumstances. So I truly believe that it is realistic date. It's ambitious but realistic date. Thank you.
One more important partner with us, France, Monsieur le Ministre Benjamin Haddad, Minister Delegate for Europe and Special Envoy of the President. I'm told we have a question for you coming from Union Sayenko.
Thank you for this opportunity to ask a question. I would like to refer my question to French Minister. France has already provided Ukraine with very significant support in order to help to survive our country, especially provided us Scalp long-range missiles, howitzers called Caesar, armored fighting vehicles, ammunition, and other vital support. And my question is your country ready to continue support Ukraine for another year? Are you ready to increase this level of support? And my quick follow-up for the President of European Commission and President of European Council. You have already heard proposal from the Lithuanian President that there should be setting a date for Ukrainian accession by the 1st January 2030. Is this a goal of your mandate to coordinate and help Ukraine really become a member of European Union by this date, 1st of January 2030? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, France will continue to support Ukraine for how long it takes, for the simple reason that Ukrainians are not just fighting for their security and their freedom, but for the security of Europeans against the threat
that Russia poses for all of us. You were kind enough to mention long-range missiles, the Caesar cannons. We have the first
Yeah, very
Mirage
well known.
jets now flying in the
Badger,
skies
where's
of,
that story?
Ukraine, as well as the Anne of Kiev brigade that's been deployed on the ground, and we will continue to do so. President Macron, as you know, is today in Washington, D.C. to continue the respectful and honest dialogue that he has with President Trump, to say that very simply, we support the peace through strength approach, and for this to succeed, we need to continue to support Ukraine on the ground. We need to increase pressure on Russia, and this is why we welcome the adoption of the 16th round of sanction today on Russia, that Ukrainians need to be around the table when their security is being discussed. Europeans need to be around the table, and that there can be no just and lasting peace without robust security guarantees in the long run. And this is where also Europeans will have to step up and take their responsibility. And France is ready in this respect to continue to take its responsibility alongside its partners for the security of Ukraine, the security of all of us.
So to your question concerning the initiative of President Gitanas Nauseda, I think it's a very noble initiative because it shows a lot of political will and an amazing support to Ukraine, and thank you very much for that. The process of accession, we always repeat, is merits-based. Basically, it says there are certain conditions and reforms that you have to do and you have to implement.
Okay, I found it. You
so
guys
that,
got to look at this.
The conditions are right for an accession, and it's good.
You got to click on that
for
link.
the European Union, and it's good for the accessing country. So that is always necessary.
Resist.
What I want to emphasize is
This is my
that
girl.
if you would just only set a date, then it would also mean the other candidate countries would ask immediately for a date and not a process anymore. But again, I really appreciate the political will that is there. I would even say Ukraine, merits-based process, if they continue at that speed and at that quality, perhaps they could be earlier
I'm shocked.
than 2030. So thank you very much for giving the impulse, and let's work hard on all sides really to keep the momentum up.
I never went to Veselka, but I've seen it. You're right, Max. It's such a famous restaurant.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, President.
For sure, Ukraine's accession to the European Union will be the most important
Oh, is he the head of the EU?
for the future of Ukraine. And
No.
we have already decided that this new institutional cycle will be the institutional cycle of enlightenment to Ukraine, to Moldova, to Western Balkans, and we don't know with Georgia. It's a merit-based process, and we are working hard from the European Commission to the different candidate states. And it's very impressive what Ukraine is making. Because in fact, Ukraine are writing a new playbook how to make reforms at war times. And this is
Iggy, hi, love.
difficult to imagine. But we are very committed.
Oh, Stuytown. That's a great place to live.
The different member
I knew
states,
people that lived there, but I
Commission,
never did
and
live there.
Ukraine, Moldova, the Western Balkan countries
I lived on the
working
west
very
side.
hard to deliver on this enlightenment. And we need
I
also
lived off 9th
to
Avenue.
work among us to make the necessary reforms to welcome,
I know, Slava Ukraina. It really is an important.
El confidencial, permito ahora no. While I was coming here, I met just in the street a Ukrainian friend who told me to say thank you for the billion euros you announced today. And when I said goodbye to him, a question came to my mind, like, how would you explain to these Ukrainian citizens and other Ukrainian citizens, and also to the Spanish taxpayers, that Spain still this year, last year, 2022, is paying more, 2 times, it's paying 2 billion euros to Russia, buying liquefied gas, and today we are only announced 1 billion to Ukraine.
Ooh.
And so I would like to ask you,
Ooh, Ursula's so funny.
to Spanish taxpayers,
Because
She's a terrible meeting person.
fund the war. And to President Zelensky, I would like to ask that you said trust with partners is very important. So I would like to know.
Oh,
how do you
gosh,
feel
Max, what a
with
great
partners that
background.
still pays money, a lot
That's
of
a
money,
cool.
more money than they give to you, to the enemy, or partially at least. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the questions. First of all, Spain has supported all the sanctions packages approved by the Council. And we've been very constructive and positive in order to increase the pressure on Russian shoulders in order to stop the war.
Oh.
Second, you're talking about private contracts, but the political will of the Spanish government, and I would say the Spanish society, is to reduce and diversify our energy dependencies towards other countries. And we have done so. We have done so. Our main provider is now in North America, not only the US, but also Canada. And last but not least, I would say that that we have committed ourselves as Spanish government to devote 1 billion euros for the next 10 years, each year, in order to provide that military capabilities to
Yeah,
Ukraine.
but
So,
you didn't answer the question, sir.
Ukraine, we are supporting President Zelensky and his government,
What do you mean they're private contracts?
even if we're far away from
What does that mean?
because we're coming from the Iberian Peninsula, we have also a good representation of the Iberian Peninsula with the President of the Council, Antonio Costa, and myself. I think that people in our society understand quite well the importance of defending and providing this support to Ukraine.
Oh, Max.
That peace and security in Ukraine and in Europe. And by the way, you know, when it comes to enlargement, since we come from a country which became a member state of the European Union back in the 80s of the 20th century, we're always open.
I think it's $1 billion a year
in the approach of the enlargement
for 10 years.
Moldova and Western Balkans. So, you know, I think that and this is not because it's the political
Damn.
will of
Okay.
the government.
The dog is barking. Hold on.
Spanish society, which really feel that solidarity before when we were, you know, with some problems.
All right. Oh, I hope they don't end this.
Other countries such as Ukraine need that solidarity.
There we go.
And I'm also very happy that we agreed.
I have to walk the dog. I think it's $1 billion a year for 10 years.
In Spain, since we are
All right, I'll BRB. I'm sorry about this.
country in the European Union receiving Ukrainian refugees in our country to provide that services not only from the Spanish government but also from the Ukrainian government.
Okay, one last one to wrap up from the Ukrainian media to Ukrainian president. 1+1. Прошу, слово вам.
Пане президенте, ви не раз говорили про те, що Росія насправді абсолютно не прагне миру, і, власне, в підтвердження цих слів сьогодні маємо картину, коли тут об'єднаний світ збирається для того, щоб поговорити про мир, поговорити про домовленості, вирішити нагальну проблему. Росіяни в обличчі Лаврова говорять про те, що ми не проти, щоб Європа була на перемовинах, проте ми все одно не припинимо вогонь, якщо не задовольнять все, що хочемо ми. Тобто позиція у них конкретна. Ви сьогодні згадали і сказали про те, що хочете, аби до кінця року ми мали мир. В зв'язку з такою позицією росіян взагалі, наскільки вірогідна перспектива такого швидкого миру, хоча б до кінця року, ми не говоримо про тижні. І дуже часто минулого тижня звучала фраза про те, що треба йти на поступки. Для України яка межа між поступками і яка межа між примусом до миру, який може бути зрадою, як сьогодні зауважив ваш чеський колега? Дякую.
Дякую за запитання. Ну, це ж не перший ультиматум Російської Федерації. Я, якщо чесно, навіть не чув, або, ті самі слова ми чуємо там кожного тижня. Нічого нового немає. Всьому треба робити своє, треба посилювати себе, посилювати розуміння, що можемо зробити в Європі, збільшувати виробництво, посилювати нашу армію, домовлятися з партнерами, безумовно, це без Росії, домовлятися з партнерами про гарантії безпеки для України. Тобто будемо готові до всього і паралельно робити все, щоб дипломатичний трек, про який говорять і в Європі, і в Сполучених Штатах Америки, напевне, бачити щось, якісь можливості в цьому треці, але не порушуючи Конституції нашої держави і не порушуючи інтересів українців і всіх європейців. Да. І тому тут про це можна дуже багато і довго говорити. Давайте, незважаючи на те, які ультиматуми звучатимуть з російської території, давайте робити своє. Мені здається, поки у нас є такі сильні партнери, ми не наодинці проти них. Я думаю, у нас все вийде. Дякую.
Дякую, пане президенте. And thank you, distinguished leaders. Thank you, press. This we conclude. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Sì.
I'm back. Hold on. I'm sorry. Oh no, you're rolling out. Okay, no problem. Hold on. I'm so sorry. Goddamn dog. Sorry. Okay. Hold on. Hold on. Where's my other thing? Oh wait. We wanted to watch this small clip. Oh, here we go. Here we go. This is a clip that I'm so sorry. Oh, okay, good. Oh, we were running. That dog and I were running. Okay, here we go. This is a clip that a 2-minute clip that let me check. Interesting SBW pick my. Oh, you guys, I love this. NATO members, but not an official NATO summit. No, it's just a. It was a security conference or something, I think, about Ukraine. All right, here we go. Let's just listen to this. This is Zelensky. All right, here we go.
Тут немає можливості для емоцій. І тому я маю прагматичний підхід до наших відносин з сьогоднішньою адміністрацією і буду продовжувати саме так, але безумовно я би не назвав ці слова в мою адресу від президента Трампа компліментами, м'яко кажучи. Я розумію це так, але для чого ображатись? Ображався би на слово диктатор той, хто є диктатор. А так я це сприймаю як, ну що ж, зробиш. І я не збираюсь визнавати 500. Хто б що не говорив, як би ми не спілкувались. При всій повазі, ще раз, при всій повазі до партнерів, але я стійко стою, тому що це правдива ситуація. Абсолютно ми праві. І друга ситуація, якщо чесно, навіть 100 мільярдів я не готовий фіксувати. Поясню чому. Тому що ми не маємо визнавати гранти як борги. Подобається це чи не подобається? Якщо це вимушено, і нам зараз, і ми без цього не можемо, напевно, ми на це повинні йти. Але у мене питання, скажіть логічне, і мені на нього ніхто не може відповісти. Коли Сполучені Штати Америки продають зброю Ізраїлю, Катару, Саудівській Аравії, Об'єднаним Арабським Еміратам, чи вони заробляють 100%? Все нормально. Я просто хочу діалогу з президентом Трампом. Мені здається, я справедлив в тому, що я хочу діалогу. Я не підписую те, що будуть виплачувати 10 поколінь українців.
I am not signing off on something that will be a debt for Ukrainians. Oh my gosh.
Well, the war in Ukraine is entering its fourth year.
I know. Hold on, Australia. It's not your turn. This is the other thing that Gal had sent. Jane Fonda. Now, don't forget my great Jane Fonda story. Okay. Lolo left us. We should shut this down then. That's right. And they're like, we're done. No, Jane Fonda. Okay. You remember my Jane Fonda story because I've got one. I was walking into Gelson's in West Hollywood about, I don't know, a year ago, I guess. And, walking into Gelson's, and this guy walks out and he double takes on at me, and I'm like, oh boy. And he's like, I'm sorry, but are you Jane Fonda? And I'm like, no, I'm not 90 years old. Thank you. I think my face was a little thinner then, but yeah, that's I'm like, no, I'm not 90 years old. No, I love Jane Fonda. I'm just kidding. The Jane Fonda was really Jane Fonda, yeah. No, I didn't meet Jane Fonda. I hope so. I hope to. I love Jane Fonda. Okay, let's see. Fonda received the SAG Lifetime Achievement Award at the event, and the 87, okay, she's 87, I'm sorry, actress reminded the room, it's okay to be a late bloomer as long as you don't miss the flower show. She has some, she's had some good work done. The woman who is as much an activist as Starr reminded the world of her political passions, including saying she is a big believer in unions. And this is really important right now when workers' power is being attacked and a community is being weakened. Fonda then pointed out that SAG, which stands for Screen Actors Guild, is different from other unions since actors don't create something tangible, but rather create empathy. She shared some of her views on acting, including, while you may hate the behavior of your character, you have to understand and empathize with the traumatized person you're playing, right? Using the example, among others, of Oscar nominee Sebastian Stan, starring as Donald Trump in the film The Apprentice. Make no mistake, but I can't see anything. Make no mistake, empathy is not weak or woke, Fonda noted. And by the way, woke just means you give a damn about other people. Fuck yeah. Fonda, an outspoken critic of Donald Trump, also made reference to current events. A whole lot of people are going to be really hurt by what is happening, what is coming our way, she said. And even if they're of a different political persuasion, we need to call upon our empathy and not judge, but listen from our hearts and welcome them into our tent, because we're going to need a big tent to resist successfully what's coming at us. Oh, my eye keeps watering. The two-time Oscar winner made references to defining events in history like the civil rights movement and added, we are in our documentary moment right now. That's true. She ended by offering words of encouragement, saying, there will still be beauty. There will still be an ocean of truth for us to swim in on the other side. Oh, I didn't watch. I don't watch award shows. Mostly because I'm not getting any awards. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so this is what Badger sent me. Oh, Susan Sarandon's an idiot. God, she's dope. Long live the real king. It's Trump kissing the feet of Elon, and it's playing in the Housing and Urban Development cafeteria. Someone hacked into their system and is playing this video on loop. I think that's amazing. I think that's absolutely amazing. All right. And then what I have finally for you, my loves. Well, not finally, but you know. Oh, shoot. What is going on? Oh, what happened? What happened? All right, this is what I was going to play for us. Da 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 da. Let's see. This is what I wanted to play. This is a Brookings Institute, conversation. Saw that video. Gross. I know it is gross. The two left feet. Hey, man, resistance. I'm gonna tell you, I'm very inspired by this. Resistant. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. This eye is very distracting. I don't know what's wrong with it. I don't think there's anything wrong. I think I'm just whatever, tired. Vive la résistance. So this is the Brookings Institute and Trump's return and the fate of Ukraine. And the reason it caught my eye is because one of the speakers in the panel is Fiona Hill from the prior Ukraine situation. And then there's Benjamin Wittes, who's the moderator from Brookings Institute and institution, and Constance Steisemuller, director and senior fellow, Center of the United States in Europe, Tyler McBrien, co-host Escalation, and Anastasia Lapatina, co-host Escalation. Okay. Anyway, I wanted to play this. I wanted to hear Fiona, really. So I teed it up to when it starts, and we're going to listen to some of this. So hold on.
Hey, folks. Welcome to the Brookings Institution. My name is Benjamin Wittes. I'm a senior fellow in governance studies and the editor of Lawfare. And I can't think of a more unpleasant occasion on which to gather here. This is, as you know, the third anniversary of the beginning of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. And we are here to talk about a variety of matters related to that and related as well to an immense ongoing change of U.S. policy with respect to the war. We are also here to introduce a project that we have been working at Lawfare for the last year or so, which we will talk about and introduce, which is a project that we've done with our colleagues at Goat Rodeo.
Benjamin Wittes has incredible style.
The history of U.S.-Ukrainian relations in the post-Soviet period vis-a-vis Russia. So if that sounds well-timed to the moment, perhaps it is. I can't think of a group of people that I would rather talk about this subject with than the group that is sitting on stage with me. First of all, let me just go from left to right. Constanza Steldenmuller is the head of the Center for United States and Europe, which is hosting this event, and to whom we are all guests.
That's Fiona.
Seated next to her is Tyler McBrien, who is the managing editor of Lawfare and one of the co-hosts of the Escalation podcast. Seated next to him is Anastasia Lapatina, who is the other co-host of the Escalation podcast.
But the cameraman is obsessed with Fiona.
And to my left is the great Fiona Hill.
That's true,
who,
and it's slightly darker gray.
Senior fellow here, and
I'm digging it.
Among other things, plays a sort of starring role in a number of the episodes of the podcast, including the first one, and we're going to talk about that momentarily. Before we do, however, we arranged this event when there was one major government change that was affecting Western policy toward Ukraine. And that was the transition from the Biden administration to the Trump administration and the shock therapy, maybe, that is applying to the situation. There is now a second one, which is that we did have elections in Germany yesterday.
Oh, that's cool, Carla.
Produced something of a mixed message with respect to Ukraine policy.
Hi, peace, love.
And so I wanted to ask Constanza to get us started. And,
now I have to finish that fucking song.
Give us a sense of what happened in Germany yesterday, how we should understand it vis-a-vis Ukraine, and how we should understand it vis-a-vis the American shift in policy ongoing with respect to Ukraine.
So thank you very much. And it is a distinct pleasure to co-host this with you because the Center on the US and Europe has taken the changes wrought on Europe and on the transatlantic relationship by the Russians' full-scale invasion extremely seriously. It has literally reconfigured the way we work in every possible way. And I couldn't think of a better thing to do today with a better group of people. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
As for the German election, I'm still processing it. But to those of you who occasionally follow the news, it will not have escaped you that the incoming new Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, has made some newsworthy comments, both yesterday and in previous days, on Europe's need for nuclear weapons, on what seems to him like the end of transatlantic relations.
Yeah, Merz is not great.
And so on.
But
suffice it to say that this is a Chancellor who, in all fairness, like his predecessor Olaf Scholz, is deeply committed to Europe and also to the transatlantic relationship and the friendship with America, except that he's committed to the old transatlantic relationship and the America that he grew up with. So the current shifts in Washington are, I think, going to make that slightly difficult for him. Now, I don't want to joke about what is a deeply serious situation. I have just come back from 3 weeks in Europe, and the real turmoil in the transatlantic relationship started with J.D. Vance's, the vice president's speech in Munich.
It started with Trump's call to
Valentine's
Putin,
Day, February 14th. I was in the overflow of the overflow room listening to it because every single participant of the Munich Security Conference wanted to hear it. And Fiona was there as well. And I think it is fair to say that Europeans were profoundly shocked by it. I have been making the rounds in Europe, not just in Germany, but also I'm coming from Stockholm. And the Swedes who thought they had joined NATO just in time are now finding that they are joining a slightly different NATO than they thought they joined. So there is turmoil everywhere, and people are processing things everywhere. But let me give you a capsule version of what I think happened last night in Germany. We always knew that the Conservatives were going to win this election. They polled at double the polling levels of the governing SPD. The question was, how many parties would Friedrich Merz have to govern with? And that was settled very late last night with a real nail-biter of a counting of votes. BSW, the extreme left party, led by the firebrand Sarah Wagenknecht, missed entry into the parliament, missed the 5% threshold by 13,000 and something votes. It will not surprise you to learn that they are going to go to the courts over this and demanding a recount, which is unusual in Germany. But there we are. I think we're catching up with other countries. So Friedrich Merz, based on that result, and unless it is overturned by the courts, which I have a hard time seeing because we all use paper ballots, it's slightly more difficult to sort of fake results there. It is Friedrich Merz is going to govern in a grand coalition with the Social Democrats. And I don't think that he will have any compunction in supporting Ukraine. I think he intends to be a strong player in Europe. The reservations I have about that is that last night also saw a doubling of the AfD seats in Parliament, nearly a doubling of its vote share, with extremely high shares in Eastern Germany of up to 37%. In total, they have
AfD, just for
that part, extreme right
Nazis
for Germany. No, they're not neo-Nazi. That's not precise.
Okay.
They are good friends with neo-Nazi groupings, but they are not by definition neo-Nazi, and I think that is an important thing to say. The German Domestic Intelligence Service have determined them to be, in part or in some of the state-level organizations, fully extremist, right-wing extremist. But they have been very careful in avoiding, except for some, fringe figures and one or two of their leaders, in avoiding actual Nazi language. Also, forgive me. I say that because it is they are doing this very deliberately and strategically. And it is one of the things that makes it difficult, for example,
she's
to
making an excellent
ban them,
point,
which German law would allow.
She's making a very good
the
point.
Vice President of the United States would consider yet another suppression of free speech and democracy, if that was attempted. But that is where we are. I think Friedrich Merz will be quite constrained by an opposition headed by an extreme right-wing party that will be out to hunt him and that will be out to split his party. I think he will try to reach out to Europe. He will try to reach out to NATO. But I am going to put out there that ultimately I think he may end up being a transitional figure in what is going to be an ever more fragmenting German political landscape. And I'll leave it at that.
All right. Fiona.
Okay, I want to stop there for a minute, okay? I think what she said is actually crucially important. Crucially important. Because what I heard her say was that, first of all, I did a little reading on Merz yesterday as he was winning or whatever. And he kind of grew up very close to Angela Merkel, right? So he's really from the Angela Merkel, but even slightly less socially left-leaning than Angela Merkel was, if you want to call her that. Anyway. But she's also speaking to us from a German perspective of the fact that the language that party, just like the Republican Party, okay, just like the Republican Party, uses language that attracts white supremacists, neo-Nazis here in America, etc., right? Or those who hold that type of worldview. The AfD in Germany is acting very much the same because the laws in Germany are very specific about the language you use and there's laws against invoking Nazi references, culture, whatever. So what she's telling us isn't that they're not neo-Nazis. She's telling us that they are aligned with neo-Nazis, but that they understand politically that they cannot simply be neo-Nazis in public. So while it's the same thing here, not every Trump voter is a Nazi, but every Nazi is a Trump voter. Okay, think of it that way. She's saying not all AfD members are Nazis, but all Nazis are AfD members. That's what she's trying to tell us. She's trying to tell us of the political nuance in her country that will then push Merz to have to include. That's why the 19% or 20% of the vote that the AfD got yesterday and the parliament seats that they increased, that was the strongest showing for that far-right party in Germany since the end of World War II in whatever iteration it was, right? So the problem is she's telling us there's a problem in Germany. There's a problem in Germany. Because not only is Merz kind of a, little bit of a traditionalist, lives in the past kind of thing. Not only is he that, even though he's pro-Ukraine, he's still that kind of old traditionalist, might bow down to Trump in some weird way. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. And he's got to contend with this far-right parliament section that he has to then negotiate with. It's a fucking terrible position, right? And so the other thing, yeah, of course you are a Nazi. That's not the point, though. She's not making that point. She's making the point of what the political winds are in Germany that are influencing Germany as a partner, in fact, the partner when it comes to the European defense. You know, I think Germany, of those countries, might have the largest military, although I could be wrong about that. So that is very interesting. The other piece that she said that was very, very interesting, and I was watching this yesterday, is that the SPD, which is like the left group, and then there's a farther left group, and I don't remember the letters for that, the acronym. But that far left group didn't get any seats in parliament. They just missed the threshold of getting seats in parliament. So now you're missing some of that critical far left element in the parliament, then will help pull and galvanize whatever good intentions Merz might have towards global, right, whatever, geopolitics. So this was a very, I mean, it was packed what she fucking, Julie Andrews fucking brought it, all right? Julie Andrews said, hold my beer, hold my schnitzel. Yeah, it's terrifying that it's grown, you guys. That's what she's trying to fucking tell us. And they can't just say they're Nazis, and they're not technically a neo-Nazi group because they can't be. Otherwise, they wouldn't be a political party in fucking Germany. They have rules. Anyway, so I think it's fascinating. Now we're going to get to Fiona. This is good. This is good shit. Like, share, subscribe, motherfuckers. No, I'm just kidding. I work hard for you. No, I'm just kidding. Here we go. Let's listen more.
You were also at Munich. Give us a sense of your impressions of where the United States is right now with respect to Ukraine and with respect to European interactions on that subject.
Well, thanks very much. I would say it's great to be here today, but I guess for all of us it isn't really, is it? It's quite a depressing, as you said at the very beginning, anniversary and commemoration, especially for Anastasia and others who are from Ukraine itself. And I think before we start to do this analysis, we just want to fully process what Ukrainians have been through during this last 3 years. And I mean, this is an absolute tragedy. For Ukrainians, I mean, it's one of the reasons that Anastasia and others are here. And we have to always remember the human side of this. And I just wanted to say that I listened to Vice President Vance's speech, standing next to Andriy Yatsenyuk, the former Prime Minister of Ukraine, who I happened to meet as I went into the overflow room of the overflow room. I'm not quite sure which overflow room I was in, but there were many. And I did actually try to attempt to intercede on his behalf with people who were guarding the main room to see if he could enter. I tried the old former Prime Minister of Ukraine routine for him, but it didn't work. So he was stuck standing next to me, and he literally turned to me and said he thought he was going to cry after hearing the speech. And this is obviously a kind of a man who's been through, quite a lot. So that will just, put things into perspective. There is a human side to all of this that we must not forget. And I want to, in a way, I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to kind of flip it around a little bit, because it's what has the United States done to itself in the eyes of Europeans, which was really depressing to listen to. So I came to the United States in 1989, when there was a complete shift in the Cold War. And I came here with, I guess, starry, rosy eyes. I became a US citizen. I never thought that I would find myself in a position where I was listening to Europeans, and the UK used to be part of Europe, remember, before Brexit, and also, UK and other politicians talk about the United States as an adversary. And that was exactly what started to happen after the Vice President's speech. Because suddenly, it was as if a switch had been flipped.
I was also standing next to a prominent member of the German Green Party whose family were refugees from the former Soviet Union, who's extraordinarily well known. He said he was sick to his stomach. He never expected that the beacon, kind of a freedom and opportunity that everybody had looked towards from the kind of Cold War onwards was suddenly, basically lecturing Europeans about free speech and also openly siding with, as Constanze has discussed, an extreme right-wing party. It was not something that anybody in that hall could have fully processed. Now, the Europeans also know that they have themselves, and this is kind of writ large, something to blame for this predicament and this state of affairs. So, like Constanze, I've been spending a lot of time going around Europe. 2 years ago, I lived in Germany for 5 or 6 months, just after the so-called Zeitenwende, the period when the previous Chancellor Scholz realized that the world had changed rather dramatically after Russia's invasion. And it was also very sobering to see that there was a kind of sense of helplessness and paralysis in Germany over this, which, kind of Merz is obviously the response to in some respects, to those, Constanze says, a very fractured electorate. I've been spending a lot of time in the United Kingdom, my home birthplace. I still remain a dual citizen there. I've also just been in Paris, coincidentally at the same time that many of the European leaders showed up for a kind of an emergency meeting in the wake of the Vance speech. And like Constanze, Scandinavia, and all kinds of other countries in between. And there's a real feeling that the Europeans really mismanaged and wasted, not just the last several years after the invasion of Ukraine, but the last decade plus since the Wales summit, where President Obama basically exhorted all of them to think about taking their own defence more into consideration and to all reach 2% spending of GDP. So that was 2014. That was coterminous with the first invasion of Ukraine and the seizing of Crimea. And now the realization has set in the kind of 10 years, that they're 10 years behind being really serious about their own defence. So that was also that moment where it became obvious that basically farming out your security to the US was no longer an option. And they've been told that nicely for quite some time. Now they were told in a rather brutal fashion, not just by Vice President Vance, but also by new Secretary of Defense Hegseth, that Europe is no longer a priority for the United States.
I don't know,
And we've always
Max.
thought when we're
Really
looking at
good
Ukraine,
question.
getting back to your
Why aren't
initial
Clinton, Bush,
question,
and Obama
as we got
speaking
into
out?
a war of attrition, and some of you will remember this from earlier discussions we've had here at Brookings and all kinds of writings that various people have had, that the one way that you get a shift in a war of attrition is where the external environment has a major change. And this has been the major change, not, as many might have hoped, a shift in the dynamics inside of Russia, which has been a bit of a solid rock for the last 25 years and remains so. Putin hasn't really budged in terms of his worldview. But the shift has been here in the United States. The United States, as we all know, because we've been living in it, has been in a process of constant change for the last 25 years, going back to 9/11, the interventions in Afghanistan, invasion of Iraq, etc., etc. I mean, we have been literally all over the place. And finally, it's the United States that has changed. And in Moscow, the feeling is the United States has converged with Russia and with Russian views. And that's what shifted the entire dynamic. And so that's actually where we are now with Ukraine. The United States has shifted, and Europe has realized that if it wants to be serious about its own security, and also about a long-term settlement for Ukraine, which is essential to European security, then they need to change as well. And that's going to be the big question as we look ahead. We have President Macron of France coming into town today. He may already be here. He's not joining us, as I learned, for our
he's
for our
welcome
session.
on the stage.
Yeah,
if you
it would
want.
be great to hear from him, but I'm sure we'll be hearing
Add a
plenty
chair.
from him. And we've got Prime Minister Starmer of the UK coming in on Thursday. And the writing is very much on the wall for everybody that Ukraine's future is also the future of European security. And the Finns and the Swedes, who did join NATO, also joined precisely because they realised that you need to have a new look of European security. And the Finns,
it's not supporting the break glass moment that we all think we're in,
are actually all ready to go. They are probably, one of the best equipped, most battle ready at all times militaries, because they had the Ukraine experience back in the beginning of World War II when they were invaded also by the Soviet Union and had to fight them off all on their own. And they've
I mean,
never,
we haven't even talked about
basically lost that
Georgia
dynamic and
or
that importance. So I think there's a really
Kazakhstan. We haven't
consequential
talked about
time today
Azerbaijan.
where every chicken has come home to roost.
Yes, thank you. I want to pick up on something you said at the beginning, which is that we have to not forget the personal tragedy and experience of Ukrainians in this conversation. And so, Nastya, I want to ask you to tell us two stories. The first is what were the circumstances in which you learned about the American change in policy? You literally were on your way from Kiev to here to do this event and to launch this podcast when all of a sudden the United States switched sides. So first of all, I want you to just tell us about that experience. And then secondly, in the back, although she may be here, is your one-year-old daughter. And I want you to tell us the circumstances of Ava's birth.
It will be relevant, I promise.
The details may not be important.
We'll admit the gruesomeness of it all, but thank you, and thank you for arranging all of this. It's amazing to have an opportunity to speak about it all. So, yes, when I don't think Trump decided to flip a switch. When a bunch of Ukrainians realized who he actually is, that's more like it, I was somewhere between the 3 trains and 2 planes and the 4-day-long travel from Ukraine to here. And I couldn't help but think that, like, my whole life I've had an image of the U.S. as this kind of, standard of what is right and what is good. And when the Revolution of Dignity happened in Ukraine, I was tiny. I was 12 or 13, and that's sort of like, since then I have conscious memory of my life and what's right and what are my values.
Yeah, it's 2014.
Yes, and since then I've always known that, like, this is who we are as Ukrainians. We align ourselves with the West. We look to the US for guidance. We look to Europe for guidance. This is what's right, and what's on the East is very, very wrong, and we never look there. And so I'd always joke that, like, we don't mind American meddling, when some of my more leftist-leaning friends, would accuse the U.S. of neocolonialism or something when it comes to Ukraine. I'd be like, we actually love it. Like, please come and clean everything up. Like, get rid of corruption. Like, get involved. Like, and many people who joke about this because, the alternative for us has always been Russia, right? Because the geography really messed us up. We're really stuck in there, in between 2 sides, and so this whole image of the U.S. as this barometer of what's good and bad, it really shattered for me in the last week. And I keep saying, I keep hearing people say that there is no going back, that this damage that Trump has done is kind of irreversible. And you will explain to me later whether that's true, better than I do. But that's just, like, really depressing, because now I feel like, the U.S. is sort of gone and doing whatever it is that it's doing. Europe isn't really doing anything. And as one friend of mine put it, it would be nice if Europe was a thing. Like, that would be helpful. So that's certainly how Ukrainians view it, because Ukrainians, and we'll get to that, have had bad experiences with the U.S. over history and with Europe as well. And so we now really feel like we're once again just, like, left on our own. And it's really not a position that anyone should be in. And we now don't even have a standard, like, of institutionalism or of values and liberty. Like, we're now being accused of being a dictatorship, which is laughable, right? And so there is this just, like, prevailing feeling of disappointment that everything I've always thought of as right and good connected to the US, like, it's all shattering kind of in front of my eyes, and it affects the entire country. So that's just really depressing. So the spicier story about Ava's birth. So my daughter, she's sleeping, thank God. She's very much cooperating with this event, and I'm grateful for it. She was born on December 31st in 2023. And, you know, that's already crazy enough. The whole thing is crazy enough. What's even crazier is that the next day after that, Russia launched one of its biggest ever aerial attacks against Ukraine. I think it was January 1st or January 2nd. So at the time that, you know, we were still at the hospital, we haven't checked out and left home yet, at 5 a.m. at some point, there is this massive attack. I mean, it's like almost 100 drones or something. I may be exaggerating, but it was really big. At that point, it was called one of the biggest attacks in years. And so it was just incredible, right? Because I mean, we were fine. We were all taken to this underground shelter with dozens of very pregnant women. And I was only like very thankful that I've already, you know, got her out. So I don't have to go through that experience in a bunker. So, you know, that was helpful. But I distinctly remember the feeling that me and people around me, other moms with like 1-year-old babies, we weren't scared because we've been at this for years at that point and we've lived there since the very beginning. We were just very annoyed. There was this like frustration that like we really shouldn't be dealing with this, like in any circumstance, but especially right now. And I really didn't spot fear in people's eyes. It was more of like, okay, like when is this going to be over? Like, can we just go and like have a life and you know, and take care of our babies? And I think it's so tragic that those were the emotions that we're feeling, because that means that
Slava Ukraine.
Like, we're all, not all, I can't speak for all, but a lot of us are pretty much numb at this point, because we see this gruesomeness and this tragedy every single day. And at some point, unfortunately, even though I'd prefer that we kept feeling, you know, the strongest empathy and the strongest sense of loss, at some point, something in your body on a biological level just adapts, and that just becomes a part of your life, and you end up being in interviews with Iranian drones flying around you, and you're not going anywhere because God bless American air defense, you know, and you know you'll be fine, most likely. And you just keep on living with it, and people tell you, you know, stay safe, and you don't even know what that means anymore because that's just your reality. And so it's just the fact that we've been at it for 3 years is
I have
insane
some
to me,
links.
because I remember having a conversation with a friend.
I'm curious to see which ones you pick.
Early April 2022, so just around a month since the full-scale invasion started, after the full-scale invasion started. And I was in Lviv at this time, a city in eastern Ukraine. And I wanted some of my friends to come stay with me, and they fully seriously told me that they don't want to leave Kyiv because they want to be there for Victory Day. And so my friends didn't come because they had this distinct feeling that they were on the precipice of this historic moment, right? They were ready to march through Hrishatik in their vishvankas and flags and celebrate it. But now it's 3 years later, and I'm, you know, sitting here, and we're going to talk about how our biggest ally is turning into something of an enemy. And so, you know, that's, I guess, is where we're at.
She
I just want to say, if
launched a
that sounds
podcast. She's
dramatic,
Ukrainian.
Nastya is actually understating it. I woke up that morning to a set of texts from her, which I think I still have.
I'll send a link, Paul J.
This was January 1st, 2024. And the first one said, the good news is I have a beautiful baby girl. The bad news is I'm in a bomb shelter under the hospital with a whole bunch of laboring moms. And
you don't know what to think, because on one hand, it's a hospital. No one targets a hospital, but then you're like, no, they're Russians. They actually might deliberately
there was
target
an attack
a hospital.
on a maternity hospital at one point.
Yes.
And so, all right, well, I don't mean to be glib, but the good news is we got a rip-roaring podcast out of it. So Tyler,
Escalation is the podcast. It's from Lawfare.
You gotta.
Her and this
take
guy
lines where
Tyler
they
do this
present
new
themselves.
podcast.
So Tyler, tell us a little bit of the story of escalation and how this project had its genesis and where it came from. Give us a little bit of the sort of institutional history of the project we're releasing today.
Yes, thanks, Ben, and thanks to everyone. I'm honored to be up here with this panel. I think the past 3 weeks especially have been a bit of a proof of concept for escalation, to say the least. This podcast started, I mean, I guess 3 years ago, you could say, with the full-scale invasion. And about a year in, maybe, I had joined Lawfare as managing editor. The biggest story in foreign policy in the world at the time, and in many ways still is, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So it just seemed like, on the one hand, an obvious choice to think about how we could tell the history of the U.S. and Ukraine and how to explain what we were seeing. I am certainly no Russia expert. I'm no Ukraine expert. So it's not surprising that I was surprised at the full-scale invasion, but I got the sense that even people who have been watching this closely were also surprised. So we wanted to answer that question. Around that time, I believe, Nastia had been doing amazing reporting for the Kyiv Independent, and Ben was hosting a show called Live from Ukraine, and Nastia had joined one of those episodes. And what was really important, I think, of that show was to get a sense of what it was like for Ukrainians in Ukraine at the time. I think this conflict especially has been the victim of a lot of misinformation and revisionism. And so a podcast that really lays out the history of the U.S.-Ukraine relationship, we felt was so important to set the record straight.
I very much want to listen to that. I'll just say one more
thing, that working with Nastia over the past year, I think you got a good sense of how it was a really healthy dose of perspective every time I was maybe feeling tired and trying to finish up an edit or something. And it was quite humbling then to have someone on the other end of Zoom who is 8 years younger than I am, has an infant, is under bombardment, is in an air raid shelter. And I think that's also what we're trying to do with this podcast is really drive home what this experience is like and what the stakes are.
So I want to, one of the key voices, perhaps the key voice in the first episode, is Fiona, who tells this incredible story about that I think most Americans have, if they ever knew of, and I certainly did at one point because I lived through it, but I'd completely forgotten about it, which is how reticent the United States administration was about the idea of Ukrainian independence to begin with. And one of the themes that we've been exploring in the podcast is this recurrent cycle of American policymakers not being as fully on board for the idea of an independent Ukraine as they later imagined themselves to have been. And a lot of these episodes seem to involve European cities that begin with BU. But this one actually involved the president going to Kyiv and making a speech not quite against Ukrainian independence, but almost against Ukraine.
I'd say it was against. Just saying.
It was certainly not for. And so, Fiona, take us back. You have this incredible line in the first episode where you say, you know, I graduated from my master's program, and then the field that I was in went out of existence a few months later. But tell us the story of President Bush and his speech to the Ukrainian parliament.
You know, I'm catching the eye here of an old colleague of mine, Marcia McGraw-Olive, who will remember all of this very well. We worked together at the Eurasia Foundation. You know, back in the early 1990s, it kind of kicked off thinking about this new transformed landscape after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But yes, I did a master's in Soviet studies, which soon became history. And I did a PhD in history afterwards, thinking I needed to rapidly retool after I got my degree in the June of 1991. At the same time as Edward Shevardnadze, the last foreign minister of the Soviet Union, was getting an honorary degree at the same ceremony and was looking very perplexed, you know, sort of sitting on the stage. And he was soon to be the first president of an independent Georgia. So I mean, this is taking us back, you know, a long time to 1991. because by the end of that year, the Soviet Union
haven't heard that name in
it
so
hadn't really
long.
collapsed, actually, and that's actually something that's also very important to remember, that it got picked apart by some of the elites at the top, including Boris Yeltsin, the first president of an independent Russia, because they wanted to get rid of Mikhail Gorbachev, because they needed a reconstitution, a reform, a revamping of, it sounds a little familiar about where we're sitting at the moment, of the Soviet system. And the heads of the republics of Russia, Belarus, Belarusia, and Ukraine got together to basically dismantle the Soviet Union, intending to keep together in some part. But before that, as this starts to kind of move through the whole system towards this amazing and really kind of dramatic set of events, George H.W. Bush indeed goes off to Kiev and starts to make an appeal for, the guys to keep the band together. And I mean, it's very interesting to think back on this. Next year, of course, is our 250th anniversary of the US's own independence, sloughing off the Mad King George and the United Kingdom. And it's quite remarkable to think where we've come in 250 years if we start to think about what that anniversary is going to look like next year. And yet we've had a hard time, despite the fact of being a revolutionary
Now I
power,
see Mad
a power
King
that's fought
George
for its
with a Trump
independence,
face.
of really kind of going along with others when they've come to that moment as well. And I think that's because in the meantime, the United States started to become something of an imperial power itself over time. After being helped by the French to keep the Brits, out of the picture again, during the whole period of 1812, etc. After that, we kind of moved on, pretty much doing the same thing as other great world powers were doing at the time too, expanding our territory, etc., etc. And so George H.W. Bush is feeling very uncomfortable at the idea of a really kind of what he fears will be, and he was quite right in many respects, a chaotic coming apart of the Soviet Union. We've always told ourselves that in fact, it was almost violence and conflict-free, and that was not the case at all. And in fact, what we're still in the middle of is the wars of the Soviet succession. And so this is kind of like 1812. It's, kind of the whole uproar all over again, because Ukraine had been independent, for 30-plus years by the time Russia tries to kind of take it back in the fold again. And in some respects, remember that George H.W. Bush had been the head of the CIA at one point. He might not have been far wrong in thinking that we were heading, to some kind of, disastrous outcome down the line if all of this kind of came apart.
Yeah, it's an extremely powerful little story that I think represents something larger, both in Ukraine's relationship with the United States, which is the subject of the podcast, but also, Constanza, in Ukraine's relationship with Europe, because you have this moment where Ukraine becomes independent, but everybody continues to look at Ukraine through the lens of Russia, and that includes particularly European countries who see Ukraine to some degree as a transit situation for Russian natural gas. And I guess, there's this, we clearly see from the Trump administration that this has not changed in the case of the United States. We are back to thinking of Ukraine as something that you negotiate directly with Moscow about, without even having Ukrainians at the table.
And they're just
Europe
taken for their resources.
Learned the lesson that we clearly have not learned?
What? Benjamin? Fucking
I knew when I
fuck.
signed
What a
up for
dumb
this
question.
that I was going to be the damn European on this panel.
No, you're the blessed European. Are you kidding?
That's all right. It's all good. Look, I think there is a lot of fair criticism to lob at Europe and at Germany over its behavior in the past 10 years, including the fears of the Scholz-led coalition of escalation, right? That said, I do think that circumstances have changed completely. The other place I went to before the Munich Security Conference was Brussels. I spent 3 days running around NATO, the European External Action Service, and the European Commission. And I think, Well, before I get to that, I want to perhaps say something slightly more personal, because Anastasia, like you, I was a reporter for a long time, and my time as a reporter began in the years after the fall of the wall. But because I had trained as a lawyer and as a human rights lawyer, my paper said human rights stories, Rwanda, the Balkans, Afghanistan. So I spent a lot of time covering war crimes and finally war crimes tribunals. And I am angry every time I read about Russian bombardments of Ukraine. I wake up angry every bloody morning and I go to bed angry about this, right? This is not okay, right? And I think I can tell you that many of my fellow Europeans and people in my field feel the same way. A visceral, profound anger at Russia. There is no going back for my generation, right, to a comfy relationship with Russia that goes over the head of a country that has been attacked and is attacked every day. I want to make that very clear. Okay. I also want to say, Anastasia, that if we are completely fair, some of those air defenses that are protecting Kyiv right now are Danish and German.
Yes.
Right? And
yes.
And exactly.
Norwegian.
And
yes.
right. And so, and if you look at the numbers, we have the President of the United States currently telling us that we don't do anything for Ukraine financially or with military support. I think we all know that if we look at the numbers, those tell another story.
And Sweden just made a major commitment.
Yeah,
over
and
the
the Danes and so on. I mean, and I will say the other thing here that's operating here, apart from profound anger, right, about what is being done to Ukraine, and the lies being told about that in Moscow and elsewhere, is of course
in Washington now.
Why don't you just let me put it my way? The other thing that, of course, is motivating Europeans is a very real, very visceral fear about the degree of Russian disinformation and sabotage in Europe and in Germany. There was especially an amount of meddling in the German election that we have not seen, I think, since the Cold War, and maybe not even then. And the intelligence services across Europe, but also in Germany, even in Germany, I should say, because they were long very reticent about this, have been extremely forthright in calling this out and attributing it immediately. And I think the Russians have stopped bothering trying to hide their signatures. The people I met in Brussels were working day and night. We're working day and night to cobble together support for Ukraine. We're working day and night to cobble together additional money for European defense. And we're working day and night. And literally, I mean, one of my meetings started at 9:15 in the evening, not in the morning.
Yeah, because that's not a headline.
And so, let me perhaps end on a point that is easy to, I mean, it's easy to say that this is all performative, but the entire European Commission and its leadership and the leader of the Council and 13 heads of state are today in Kyiv to mark the anniversary. That has to turn into policy, right? That has to turn into money. That has to turn into more weapons. But I think it would not be quite fair to say that that's not meaningful, right? All the people that I met meant it deeply, and I think my generation knows that this is the conflict of our lifetime, and that the future of Europe depends on its resolution in favor of Ukraine.
I'd just like to add something important to what Constanza said here, because although it might not feel it from the United States, and the further, obviously, you get away from Washington, D.C., it definitely doesn't feel it. And over the last 3 years, I've spent a lot of time going all the way around the country, talking to audiences about why Ukraine actually is relevant for the United States, not just because of Ukrainian Americans, but, you know, because of actually the dependence that America has had on the larger international system that was really rooted in the transatlantic alliance, and how we've actually prospered from it over this time. And again, we've kind of forgotten all of that as time has gone on. I mean, in the UK, they forgot about why Europe was relevant, and, you know, very blithely voted for Brexit, you know, for example. So it's not unheard of to kind of, you know, lose the plot over time and forget about where things are. But in Europe right now, people know that they're under siege from Russia all the time. So as we're sitting here talking, an inquest has been going on in London about the death of Dawn Sturgis. It's not probably a household name here, but I'm sure that some of you know who she is. She is the woman who, very unfortunately, was killed by Novichok from the bottle of perfume that the Russian GRU, the military intelligence, discarded in a charity donation bin that her partner found and brought home, and they spread this perfume on each other, discovering, in fact, that it was a deadly weapons-grade nerve agent that had just been used to poison a former Russian spy, Sergei Skripal, and his daughter Yulia in the town of Salisbury. Now, the only reason this was uncovered is because the UK has a facility near Salisbury, Portland Down, where they, a bit like we have in Frederick, Maryland, where they can do testing for nerve agents, biological and chemical weapons. So only 8 countries knew that this Novichok even existed. So it was by chance that this, actually happened there. And it was able to be revealed. And this is only one, of course, of assassinations that have taken place on British soil. There was Alexander Litvinenko, who was poisoned by polonium, a radiological agent, so the first dirty bomb that was used on British soil, and also spread polonium all the way around the United Kingdom. There's lots of evidence of intervention in pretty much every European election. Constant assassinations, exactly, in the Tiergarten, and, of course, constant attacks on critical national infrastructure through cyber attacks. In fact, the biggest threat to Europe today is the critical national infrastructure. And pipelines and cables under the Baltic Sea, the Estonians, the Swedes.
It's a bigger threat than the threats to our freedom and democracy.
Etc. And so all of this is real in Europe. So Europeans know that what Ukraine has experienced, the destruction of its critical national infrastructure, all of the interventions that have been made in Ukraine's politics before,
we're too US-centric in our thinking.
Well. So although, again, we may be remote here, it doesn't feel remote in the US. And I would say if you look actually now in polling that I saw like last week in the UK, for example, where, of course, the relationship with the United States is extraordinarily important, 48% of people said in a poll that it was more important to stick by Ukraine than it was to improve the relationship with the United States at this point, 48%. In terms of favouring sticking by the United States, it was in the 20s, 20%. There was a lot of people said they didn't know because it's a hard point to be put. But we're seeing really a shift here, where people in Europe now see that their situation is on the line. So again, that rupture that we mentioned before is real, and it's a really sobering thought. And again, as I said before, chickens have come home to roost. A lot more should have been done. Many of us have been putting this, on the agenda for Europe for a long time. But it is real, the security threat in Europe. It's not just imagined. It's not just disinformation, and it's now viscerally felt.
So Tyler, I want to ask you. I referred earlier to this cycle that began with what came to be called George H.W. Bush's Chicken Kiev speech, so named
Very
by
scary. You're right,
the
Neil.
columnist William Safire, in which, sort of Ukrainians expect American backing and they don't get it at the level that they expected or that we promise it. And this is we may be going through what I think is the sort of fourth and most dramatic cycle of that, where we actually side with the Russians. But all of these episodes
Why can't we talk about the fact that there are unique characteristics?
And one of the
Why can't we talk about the fact that there are unique characteristics to our relationship right now to Russia? This was not an evolution. This was not an evolution of the U.S. position on Russia. This is a compromised agent of the Russian government, now going on 40 years. Come on. I don't love Ben Wittes. I'm going to be honest with you. Of all the lawfare people, he's my least favorite. Because he always makes these grandiose statements, but I don't get as much substance from him as I do from like Roger Parloff or Anna Bauer or something. Anyway, that's my own personal pet peeve. But I'm telling you right now, why aren't we fucking, like, I mean, maybe they're going to get to it. Maybe. Oh, little cannon. What does that mean? What is little cannon? But I'm, like, listen, like, what is the problem with talking about the fact that this is not a shift in American policy? This is a compromised government administration. Why can't we say that? I mean, maybe we just don't have evidence of it. Is that what it is? We don't have like the check stubs? Anyway. All right.
The roles that you play in the podcast is kind of as the sort of naive American who's kind of never.
It came pretty naturally.
It's a persona. It's a persona because Tyler is anything but naive. But you're the guy who's like, gee, I didn't know this happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. And to any other naive Americans listening or younger listeners, chicken Kiev is used pejoratively, which is, you may not know because it's a delicious dish and it's a, but no, I mean, you're absolutely right. It is the history of the U.S. and Ukraine since independence in 1991 has been one of misunderstandings.
I mean, they don't defame people as much as we do.
One of our episodes is called "The Worst of Both Worlds" because
also features Fiona.
Exactly right.
In one of her prior lives.
The New York Times had an editorial, I believe, over the weekend in which it condemns what they called a complete 180 in U.S. foreign policy toward
the
Ukraine.
little cannon. Okay.
And I was thinking that that's not maybe absolutely true. You know, it's
Max, I
the
bet.
U.S. You mentioned that the U.S. has viewed Ukraine for a long time through Russian lenses, through a Russian lens. There was a Ukrainian diplomat named Boris Tarasyuk, who we speak to on the podcast, who said the very same thing. He says that the U.S.
I agree,
always
Neil.
looks at Ukraine
They're
going to
be like,
Russian
oh
glasses
man, what a
and
badass
sort of
dude getting
plays
peed on.
by their terms.
They don't care.
And so, it's still. It seems that the Trump administration is looking at this history and picking the worst lessons and accelerating them, and acting on that. I will say though that there was
God, I
reporting,
really
I
missed
believe, this
that
morning
Louise
out in
Mensch thing. I
Bloomberg
just missed that
the U.S.
whole
may
ship.
commit to a sovereign Ukraine in the negotiations,
Hi, Val
which is
from
heartening.
Didgeridoo
Whether or not
Camp.
they listened to the first episode of
Hi,
Escalation,
sweetie.
I'm not sure. I can't confirm or deny that, but it just seems like that's obviously the bare minimum. But
I
it
linked
is
the Escalation podcast above. Let me pin it.
Before, like that's the Budapest memo, right?
Yeah.
And this will be less of the sovereign Ukraine than it started out with 3 years ago.
Yeah, so,
exactly.
So
give her a mic.
Walk us through a couple of those cycles, because there are as I joked earlier.
All right,
they
I
do
pinned the
tend to,
Escalation podcast
be
link
named
above.
for cities in Europe that start with BU, the first cycle is the independence of Ukraine itself, right? The Chicken Kiev speech. The second cycle comes only a few years later. What happens?
Right, so I believe you're referring to the Budapest Memorandum, which I think maybe a few years ago, you ask Americans who are very well versed in foreign policy and in U.S. foreign policy history may not. It's not a household name.
I'm really grateful
but
I
in Ukraine,
missed
it
that.
very much is.
And by the way, the only moment of true comedy in the entire podcast is at the beginning of the second episode, where our producer Max, who's sitting here in the front row, asks a young Ukrainian activist who is sitting back there, Maria Hlitin, what do you think of the Budapest memo? And she exclaims, "Oh my God, it's a total fail." This is something that is not in the consciousness of the average American, but you ask a Ukrainian about the Budapest memo, this is fresh in the front of their mind.
You have to hear how she said it, though, for full drama. So make sure to listen to that.
Yeah, well,
so
listen.
to catch us up to speed, in broad strokes, after the fall of the Soviet Union, a large part of the nuclear arsenal left by the Soviets actually was in Ukraine. They couldn't really operate it. A lot of the command and control was back in Moscow. It was very expensive to maintain. But nuclear weapons comes with some degree of security, but
Wait,
the
she
deal
really
that
did
was
a
struck
head-
was that
she did a
Ukraine would give up the
number
nuclear
on
weapons for
people.
financial incentives, as well as, from the American perspective, assurances
Mona
of
Sharon?
Ukrainian
See, I
security.
don't know any of these people.
From
I'm so
the
out of
Ukrainian
it.
perspective, I think there was an understanding that it was more of a guarantee. There was two different translations, actually.
I really missed
and
out.
I think this is emblematic of the relationship. The U.S. wanted some sort of ambiguity to give it more room to maneuver, but that maneuvering, or that room
hit the like
only
if you
left
haven't
room
yet. Oh, how I feel
for
about
Russia
Ben
to
Wittes.
take advantage
Okay.
of the ambiguity,
Yeah,
basically.
all
And
right, I get
I'll
you.
also just end by saying, in learning about this, I think it was,
I feel
it was
that
very
way about a
important
lot of people.
for Ukraine to
Oh,
give
yeah,
up
I
nuclear
don't
weapons.
like the bulwark,
Nastia
okay? I can't
disagreed,
handle
and we
those
sort
people.
of had this thing come where it was a microcosm of the U.S.-Ukraine relationship every time we would argue about an episode in the narrative arc and everything. But I think the Budapest Memo is a great example.
Yeah, so one of the striking things about that story,
I don't trust
when
anybody
we
who
talked
says shit like
to
that.
diplomats at the
There's a
very
bunch of
senior
them on
levels,
Twitter.
when we talked to people who
I'm
were
gonna drop this in 2 days.
literally, in one case, my
Fuck
sister's
off.
college roommate, who was a 22-year-old
No, you're not.
diplomat at Embassy Kiev at this time, is how guilty they feel
Really?
about the Budapest Memorandum.
I don't get her.
And,
I don't get
you
her
know,
hold
there's
on people
actually
either.
sound from Bill Clinton talking about how much he regrets it. It's a remarkable thing that I learned from the reporting of this, which is just how many people have regrets about
Oh, that's probably true, Lauren.
what we did in that context.
Roberta Flack died?
Fiona, there's another city in Europe that
Oh,
begins
no.
with BU, another European capital that where there was an understanding reached that you played a substantial role in a number of years later, that also shows up as one of these kind of recurrent cycles of are not being able to kind of form a coherent policy. Tell us about what happened in Bucharest.
Yes, and I just wanted to quickly add on the Budapest Memorandum. I'd mentioned Edward Shevardnadze before. Edward Shevardnadze, when he was president of Georgia, had actually told his Ukrainian counterparts, see if you can keep 1 or 2 of the nuclear weapons. When they were giving them up around the time of the Budapest Memorandum. They're like, what do we do? Stick them in a closet, you know, kind of, because he basically, he had been, of course, the Soviet foreign minister, and he said he'd seen documents about what would happen if any of the Soviet republics had tried to secede. And he said you might find that they might come in handy later. Which, of course, if Ukraine had still been a nuclear state, and Belarus had been as well, Belarus has been pretty much swallowed up by Russia. Ukraine probably wouldn't have been invaded. And the non-proliferation consequences of all of this are real too, because Constanza and others have been noting that in Germany and in many other places now there's talking about Europe needing to have a bomb. And, you know, what's also the message to Japan, South Korea, you know, other countries who feel threatened. And Bucharest, just so we can get back to this point as well, becomes important in that
this entire
context
thing.
because it's another
Disinformation.
effort to give Ukraine and Georgia at the time, you know, some kinds of guarantees for their future security.
Aww.
Now,
Love you,
Bucharest,
Oren.
was actually more about Georgia than it was
Roberta
about Ukraine at the
Flack.
time. And this is where, you know, the
I was
reference
just
to
singing
a worst
Killing
of
Me
both
Softly the
worlds
other day.
comes. In Ukraine, at the time of the Bucharest
what a
NATO
voice.
summit, which was
What a
in
voice.
2008, there wasn't a great deal of enthusiasm for joining NATO at that point. So we have to remember the Ukrainians, you know, the politics in Ukraine have taken all kinds of twists and turns. The Ukrainians are kind of aware that,
It's true.
and this was at the popular level of the population. There wasn't a great overrounding support for going into to NATO. But it was more of a kind of an elite project thinking around the Ukrainian president. But in Georgia, there was a full-throated desire at the popular and elite level to become part of NATO. And Georgia had been supporting the United States in Iraq and Afghanistan, and was pushing for a membership action plan to NATO. And it was thought, and I'm still trying to, I'm still years later trying to piece together who thought this, because it seems to have been a whole collection of people from all kinds of different backgrounds, that Georgia's case would be strengthened if Ukraine joined in as well. And so this was the kind of fateful decision. A letter was written to George W. Bush asking for Bush's support. President Bush, being a good Texan, this is W rather than HW, was more enthusiastic about supporting the feisty countries of Georgia and Ukraine. This was, of course, after the United States had well and truly waded into Iraq and was trying to pursue the freedom agenda. Bush thought that Ukraine and Georgia and their freedom should also be supported. I mean, I know this because I did a deep dive, a series of them for the president. These were the kinds of things that he said. And he said that if they made an appeal and that on military terms they looked like they had the wherewithal to contribute to NATO, and Georgia already was, and Ukraine at that time, as we now know, actually still had a sizable and capable army, and certainly in terms of being able to, as we've seen over these last years, keep the Russians somewhat at bay, then he would support the Membership Action Plan. The problem is, nobody else really supported it elsewhere in Europe. Partly this was to do with Mikhail Saakashvili and perceptions of him and his role. Others knew that, Ukraine wasn't, fully on board at this particular point, and there was a lot of resistance. And so what happened, though we briefed the President, I and others, that this wasn't likely to happen, we actually briefed against it because we think that under the idea that if you push for something you can't get, it's not a great idea because it just sort of shows up weaknesses and all the kind of divisions. Wow. Once President Bush decided to go ahead, there was at Bucharest, as we now know, and we've heard from Chancellor Merkel's memoirs, it was Chancellor Merkel herself who kind of opined, trying to find some kind of solution to some of her Eastern European counterparts at a side table. Well, one day they'll get into NATO. And that kind of rather casual aside of one day that they might get into NATO was pounced on by many of the East Europeans at the table who were quite supportive, a handful of them who were supportive of pushing for Ukraine's membership action plan, as well as Georgia's. That was kind of turned into the text of the Bucharest memorandum. And why it was the worst of both worlds, that one day they will get into NATO, was it wasn't really a promise. It was a kind of an open door, and Putin, of course, wanted to slam that door and jam everyone's foot in it and bash the door off, Ukraine and Georgia's face. And, of course, in August of 2008, Russia does invade Georgia at a pretext of, basically exchanges with peacekeepers in South Ossetia, which, frankly, myself and other colleagues have been warning for some kind of flashpoint in Georgia for a good year before that. There were certainly tensions building up between Georgia and Russia. And Ukraine realizes at that point that it's completely and utterly exposed in terms of security. Membership Action Plan is not Article 5. It doesn't bring you any security at all. And the big flaw in all of NATO, as far as Russia was concerned, was it was backstopped by the United States. Because at this point, Europe hasn't really been contributing, as we all know, to the extent in which it was required. So all of this comes down to a single point of failure in NATO at this point, which is the United States' willingness to kind of really backstop Article 5. And from then on, Putin's trying to test whether the United States is actually willing to, in fact, defend any of its allies.
You need to share this broadcast.
And finds out pretty quickly,
Please.
Certainly not Georgia,
and
later
after the
on in
fact.
2014.
People need to watch
certainly
this.
Not Ukraine.
Constanza, did you have something to...
There's some brilliant moments in this.
Well, I just wanted to point out, since Fiona mentioned proliferation.
I'll share the direct link
There's been
to this in the description of my video,
rather
so you
academic
can use that.
debate about nuclear weapons, just in case the Americans, for one reason or another, decided to pivot to Asia. And that academic debate has just gone live, with comments by the incoming chancellor before the election saying that and in response to the speeches by Secretary of Defense Hegseth at NATO and at the NATO Ministerial in Brussels, and then by Vice President Vance in Munich, that Europe was going to have to develop its own nuclear deterrent, that would mean that the French and the British deterrent, which is per se not enough to replace the American deterrent, would have to be expanded, and Germany would have to somehow join in that. I cannot overemphasize what kind of a sea change that is.
Yeah, what
in the
happens
politics
to the
of my
bases,
country,
like
right?
Max
That used
asked.
to be an absolute and complete taboo, and we are in fact signatories, right, of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. But I think that what we are seeing here, coming out of this White House, is taking the lid off of many things, including of proliferation worldwide. Right? I think that is, and I do not need to describe to anyone the escalation risk inherent in that. Right? We have similar debates.
This is what I protested against in the
Asia,
70s.
namely
What
in
the
Japan
fuck is
and in South Korea.
happening?
And I will say that I was
the
at a dinner at
80s.
NATO
What the fuck is
before the Munich
happening?
Security
Why
Conference.
are we going
Where
backwards?
an Eastern European said, well, we're going to have to get nuclear weapons too.
We didn't have to
that is where
think
we are.
about nuclear
And that's not a good thing.
proliferation because
And
we had these
let me
treaties
end
in
this
place.
by
What
saying,
the fuck?
I personally feel, not only do I think that is ill-advised, but it is of course a response to the fact that Russia has successfully employed the threat of nuclear weapons use in its invasion of Ukraine, and that has served as a significant deterrent against escalation by both the Biden White House and the Scholz Chancellery.
Yeah.
So
We have to keep our eyes
the
on
political
what
mechanics
is
of this.
important.
But the truth is that
I'm begging.
if that discussing a European nuclear deterrent is
We
in
are
many ways
TMZ in this
a
country, and we
distraction
cannot fucking
from
stop
a much
with
more
the
urgent issue, which is our conventional
attention to
deficiencies.
gossipy kind of bullshit.
And the need to dramatically increase our defense industrial production and defense spending. So I just want to point out that there is a NATO summit in The Hague this summer, and there are a lot of extremely urgent questions hanging over that summit. And you can see from the calendar of EU emergency summits that is now beginning on March 6th, the Council, then a European Union summit, and in the third week of March, I think you will see a ticking up of news out of Brussels and out of Europe on developing an independent deterrent of whatever kind.
All right, we're going to go to audience questions momentarily. If you have a question, flag for me. If you do not formulate your question in the form of a question or you prattle on, I will cut you off with a shocking lack of due process. Please do wait for the mic. And while we are, he who moderates most aggressively keeps the show going. While you wait for the mic, I want to ask Nastya one more question, which is, in this conversation, we have focused a great deal on American follies and betrayals. But in the podcast, we actually spend a bit of time on some Ukrainian follies, and Fiona alluded earlier to the politics of Ukraine being a little bit all over the place. So as a Ukrainian who was not born when any of that happened, some of it, not all. Yeah, some of it was more recent. Tell us a little bit about the experience of looking back on Ukrainian history in the course of doing this work.
That was actually extremely fascinating for me because, as you said, a lot of it I haven't lived through.
Max, I didn't know that. Roberta Flack entered Howard University at age 15 with a full scholarship.
Being aware of the responsibility of, spreading Ukraine's message, and that's why we have an American co-host and a Ukrainian co-host. I had to make sure that Ukraine's history was written right and given justice. So we covered a lot of extremely important topics that are underreported or that Western audiences don't understand. Like, for example, we spent a great deal of talking about language politics because everyone is utterly confused about it. So we had to explain it. But yeah, there were moments where it was very uncomfortable for me and also quite eye-opening that actually it's not just evil Americans who messed it all up. And I mean, I'm exaggerating, of course. I always knew that's not the case. But it was very interesting to see that Americans and Europeans had their great deal of problems, but also very often the Ukrainian government has messed up badly again and again. And we really made ourselves look unreliable, corrupt, and often a lot like Russia as well. And so that was very interesting and very important for me as well to, hi, baby. And so it was very important for me to, of course, be as objective and as truthful as possible, and to put my Ukrainian hat off and my journalist hat on. And I'm proud of all of the work that we've done, and I think it's going to be amazing to see that each issue that we've covered, each summit, each city, each event has these two distinct viewpoints of it and kind of two routes from the American and Ukrainian point of view. So I really hope all of you enjoy it.
So we have a lot of people who want questions. So please keep questions brief. And if you can direct them to an individual, that would be great. Sir.
Michael Lasher, I'm with The Insider. This is probably for Fiona and Constance. The United States government was in possession of at least an approximate Russian invasion plan in October of 2021. The Russians knew we had that plan because Bill Burns went to Moscow and told them. Russian Kremlin-controlled domestic media was showing in the 3 months before the start of the invasion all of the airplanes coming into Kiev with javelins and NLAWs and Stingers. And they were portraying Ukrainians as preparing for war. The 21st of February at the Security Council meeting.
We need this to head toward a question.
Yep. Shoigu talks about how Ukraine is armed and prepared for war. And on the evening that the Russians are actually sent in, the soldiers are woken up in the middle of the night, they're stripped of their cell phones, they don't even see Putin's announcement of the special military operation in which he calls Ukraine a hostile anti-Russia pumped up with modern weapons.
Okay, we need a question.
Does anybody think that was weird?
I don't know how to interpret that.
Oh, Fiona's not happy.
Well, if we think about the preparations that Putin, I know this period inside out because I was constantly being asked to comment on it and I was watching these things very carefully. The Russians were preparing the ground, as we knew, for what they were calling a special military operation, and they wanted to have a pretext. There were a number of other things that were happening around this time. Given all of the machinations in Ukrainian politics, in this kind of period, a gentleman named Viktor Medvedchuk, who is a Ukrainian very close to Putin, and Putin is the godfather of Medvedchuk's, one of his daughters, was also basically arrested by the Ukrainians. And Putin is always one person never to let one of his men go. If you know Mr. Krastikov, the assassin in the Tiergarten, one of the reasons that Evan Gershkovich and all kinds of other people were taken into custody was to basically trade for Mr. Krastikov, and that kind of worked as well. So there's all kinds of things happening that are kind of certainly affecting Putin's calculus about the reasons that he wants to go into Ukraine, because he feels, irrespective of what you're describing there that's showing out on Russian television, is that Ukraine is getting away from Russia's grip. And this has been going on for a very long time. In 2014, when Russia moved in to seize Crimea, there were also efforts to take not just the Donbass, but also Ukrainian cities back all the way down to Odessa. So if you want to go back and look at YouTube and all kinds of other missives for 2014, you will see that Russia had launched a campaign called Novaya Rossiya, New Russia, to retake the territory that was first brought into Russia by Catherine the Great. If we go back to 2006, Russia turned off the gas that was transiting across Ukraine. And if we go back to the early 1990s, before you were probably paying any attention to what was going on in Russia, there were all kinds of assassinations of Crimean Tatars and Ukrainians because Russia didn't want Ukraine to pull out of the Commonwealth of Independent States. Now, I'm going to be 60 next year, so I actually have a long memory. And I've been living all of this kind of stuff since basically the 1980s when I was a student in Moscow. My first visits to Ukraine were when it was still part of the Soviet Union. So I've been working on this issue for an extraordinarily long time. And if you take all of this in all of the totality, what you will see is right from the very early 1990s, when Ukraine was being pushed to give up nuclear weapons, there were constituents in Moscow and in Russia who saw every move that Ukraine made as basically a violation of the relationship between Ukraine and Russia and didn't want Ukraine to have any other options to go anywhere else. So every move that Ukraine makes from all this way on can be very well documented as seen as being offensive from Russia's perspective. So by the time you get to the things that you're discussing there, Putin has decided that Ukraine has no right and should not go anywhere at all. And it's not just Ukraine, of course. It's also Belarus. It's also Moldova. It's also Kazakhstan. So it's not just about how things are being depicted about Ukraine. You can see these depictions about many other places. Well, like Georgia was invaded by Russia in 2008. Exactly the same kind of depictions were happening on Russian television. So you may think it's, because I think that you're presenting something, looking at your face as well, that you're saying that Russia had cause for this. But Russia only has cause if you still believe that everywhere is part of Russia's sphere of influence. Perhaps we can take this outside so you can clarify, but of course it's weird from the point of disinformation because it wasn't actually accurate. But Russia has been gunning for the return of Ukraine basically since the 1990s when Ukraine first got away.
Ma'am?
Oh,
thank you so much.
Sit
This
down,
is a
little
question
man.
for Fiona Sariki Gandhi with ITV. What would be your advice to UK Prime Minister Starmer when he is approaching those conversations concerning Ukraine later this week?
Well, I think the Prime Minister has probably figured out very clearly that this is an enormously consequential meeting. And it's not just because of Ukraine, but it's also for the whole future of European security and for the United Kingdom itself. The UK and the United States have extraordinarily important defence relationships. And it's going to be very difficult for European members of NATO to be able to make, basically the transition to taking charge of NATO as they are being exhorted to without some kind of transitional period or some bridging by the United States. And also, the UK has made some pretty strong commitments to Ukraine.
There's no transition.
And I also already referenced polling in the UK showing that there's very large, sizable, considerable support in the UK for still supporting Ukraine, as there is, across the rest of Europe. So the case is going to have to be made, and Prime Minister Starmer has already made some commitments about the depth of UK even willingness to deploy some troops onto the ground in any peacekeeping operation. So the important thing is to get all of this across to President Trump in the best way that he possibly can. And again, I don't want to put words into his mouth. I'm sure he's thinking very carefully. And President Macron is already here. So we're seeing that all European leaders at this particular point are realizing that this is the dawning very much of a new era, and that they have to really figure out where they themselves stand, but how they're going to manage the relationship with the United States, not just with Ukraine moving forward.
We have time for one more question, and it is yours.
So let me thank you so much for an intellectually stimulating but also emotionally troubling discussion. I'd like Constance and Fiona to follow up on their points that there has been a reversal of the worldview of the United States and Russia vis-a-vis Europe. Could you contemplate how this could affect policies to punish Russia, assuming there's a ceasefire? For example, if the United States takes one approach to sanctions, to lift, but Europe doesn't. If Europe wants to punish war crimes, but...
Okay, all right. We'll get into that. I actually haven't... I have barely followed because that D'Amato guy is in Los Angeles. I can't stand anybody involved in that sentence that you just said, Carla. Opportunistic comes to mind, misogynist, simp for really bad actors. I can't stand anybody involved with the pro-Scientology, anti-Scientology. I think they're all trash. All of them. All of them are trash. I wish they'd get out of my neighborhood and get the fuck back to wherever they come from. or just stay the fuck out of my neighborhood. But they're all opportunistic fucks. I know. Spicy attitude, but I live here. So I do have to deal with it. So I don't watch, because when I did, it was all offensive. So I hope they all get whatever they deserve. Each and every one of them. And I don't even know all of them. And Eric used to be a friend of mine. And then he went like boy crazy on some asshole. And so he simps for assholes now, which is his choice. It's his choice. I'm not judging. But I'm not also dealing with those people anymore. I think they're all trash. Anyway, and they think I'm trash, so it's a mutual thing. And that's cool. You know what? You don't get along with everybody in the world. That's right. I'm actually gonna I guess I don't know if this woman's question seems like really super general. The missiles were smuggled on ships hauling scrap metal, so they didn't have a signature and couldn't be seen from satellites and shipped to Alabama. Where? What's that? Signal in bio should have been my first clue. What? Oh, yeah. No. And he's probably fine. I just personally don't like when people choose assholes as the people they're going to simp for. But that's my own personal. And also, all those people are somehow connected into the old convoy stuff, and I fucking can't stand that. And I'm done. I'm so done. I came out of that horrid experience with a few good people. And other than that, they all have very different views of how to treat people than I do. So that's fine. Live and let live. Live and let live. That's fine. But yeah, anyway, I think I'm going to end it here actually, just because I'm not sure that lady's kind of annoying me with her kind of general. What do you think? Should we all get along? Should we all go ahead and give, should some people give, what happens when we don't agree on sanctions? Well, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, Carla, I've spent way too much energy on all of that. I've spent an embarrassing amount of energy on it, and I'm really trying to just live and let live. Go ahead. Do your thing. And it's not easy, and I fail constantly. But I'm really trying to just live and let live and do my thing and be better at what I'm doing, which I have plenty of work to do on that. Yeah, berating people in the street seems like a stupid way. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. The people that are being yelled at in the street are people that are under the thumb of Scientology. So, I don't really get that. I worked in anti-trafficking in 6 countries. So I do know something about, breaking that cycle. And I'm going to tell you right now, you don't go in and traumatize the people who are the victims. That's not how you do it. A fun fact, that doesn't work. So yeah, I have a real that's one of the reasons I have such a problem with the whole thing. And, not all of them are, I don't know all of them, certainly, and they don't know me, but whatever. I would love to see Scientology taken down. I think Scientology is a cult. I think it is definitely infiltrated with the LAPD. I think they absolutely, the LAPD needs to fucking clean up. I mean, there's plenty of problems in this city. Let me tell you. And Scientology definitely is one of them. They own a lot of property and all this kind of stuff, and they should be. But I read up on a nonprofit and how you take away their nonprofit status. And I'm going to tell you right now, you document why they are not a nonprofit. That's it. That's how you get rid of their nonprofit status, is you document instances. So my suggestion to all the anti-Scientology people, crack on, McDuff, but also engage all that big audience you have in submitting the paperwork. There's actually a form that I've linked before, an IRS form that you can submit. I don't know what's going to happen now because, I voted for the lady who laughs too much. But, what else? In those days, you could have sent this form to the IRS, and eventually, if they got a bunch of forms, they might have investigated them. Imagine your huge audiences submitting documentation of the instances where Scientology is not a church, which is what you have to prove in order to overcome that burden. But no, there's no talk about that. I mean, and I'm not saying that's going to work, but I'm saying, has anybody thought of that? Because I've not heard a lot of them talk. Granted, I don't watch, so maybe I missed it. I could have missed it. No, you know what? take it down. I think it's great. It's just a little too much drama for me, and frankly, I don't see people on either side of that as having a lot of redeeming social qualities that I don't think we share the same worldview on a lot of things, and that's fine. One gets the impression that everyone in LA is walking around with a gimbal live streaming. Well, I mean, I don't think so. I don't know. I guess I see that kind of a lot. Depends on where I am in LA. Like over in here in East Hollywood, I don't see that at all. But then when you get into more central Hollywood, yeah, sure. You see a lot of tourists and people. Yeah. None of them live in East Hollywood, though. I don't think so. Where they're actually protesting. So I don't know. Maybe they could ask our neighbors what we think. But anyway, no, I don't begrudge any actual activism. I think that's great. I'm fully supportive of activism in that. And I do think Film the Police LA does some great documentation of police interactions on the street. I've admired his work for that. So I want to make that, for whoever cares, I want to make that clear. But other than that, I just haven't seen a lot of evidence that these are folks that are really seriously into stopping what they think that they're stopping. Yeah, no, they're not. No, they don't even actually live in Los Angeles, some of them do. Not many. They're like Valley, OC, kind of stuff. Falun Gong, yep. Yes, they are. And the thing is I mean, it took a Google search to find out that you can submit some particular forms to. It would be interesting. I don't know if it would work. I mean, it's not going to work now. All bets are off. Wrong administration to expect any kind of crackdown on cults. Hello. What should also scare us? I want to talk a little bit getting into serious stuff. Sorry for that diversion. But the new grift. Yeah, I know it is. Anyway, you know what? Peace to them. Bless and release. Do your thing. I'm doing my thing. Whatever. I'm not impacting you at all. So, yeah, crack on and do what you want to do. But I want to talk about Idaho. Okay, I want to talk about Idaho because it was very disturbing to me what we saw, and I understand that these are things that have happened during the civil rights era and other things where the sheriffs and other law enforcement become the violent arm of the authoritarian in charge, where the woman was forcibly removed from the town hall meeting when she was speaking out. And I think that I'm not going to play it or anything, but I'll link it in the description to the video, the reporting on it, because I think I just want us to still be shocked, even though this is the abuse that has been since time immemorial. Oh, they are Trump and Macron. Oh, wow. Oh, interesting. I can't listen to him. I can't listen to Trump, and I can only listen to it from like a research perspective. I can't listen to it from any other perspective. So let's see. Yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. Well, anyway, I want us not to be shocked. I mean, I want us to not be shocked. I want us to be outraged when things like that happen to anyone. That was just another example of outward authoritarianism and abuse. And we should all stand against that whenever it happens. And I want to acknowledge that it happens in many communities since time began. And, it's not just now that we should care about that. So anyway, I want to end with an impromptu. I actually want to record this Killing Me Softly cover. But I think it's important too. Like, one of the things I'm really trying to remind myself of is there's a lot of beauty in the world. There's a lot of beauty, and it's very important, especially with people like us who are kind of tapped into like social media around politics, and we're kind of a little overwhelmed sometimes about information flow. I just want you to today at one point, just remind yourself that there's a lot of beauty in the world and seek something out that makes that reinforces for you, whether it's like a TikTok about cats. I love TikToks about cats. I could just scroll those forever. And that, like whatever is going to show you and confirm for you that there is fucking beauty in the world. And that is not, no authoritarian can take away. They can stifle it, they can suppress it, they can do those things. But I really believe that they can't fight art. They can't fight it. It really, really helps. So I want to just like try to sing a little bit of Killing Me Softly, which I haven't sung. I mean, I haven't like practiced this, so forgive me. All right. I don't even know what key I'm going to start in. Strumming my pain with his fingers, singing my life with his words, killing me softly with his song, killing me softly with his song, telling my whole life with his words, killing me softly with his song. I heard he sang a good song. I heard he had a style. And so I came to see him to listen for a while. And there he was, this young boy, stranger to my eyes, strumming my pain with his fingers, singing my life with his words, killing me softly with his song, killing me softly with his song, telling my whole life with his words, killing me softly with his song. I felt all flushed with fever, embarrassed by the crowd. I felt he'd found my letters and read each one out loud. I prayed that he would finish, but he just kept right on, strumming my pain with his fingers, singing my life with his words, killing me softly with his song, killing me softly with his song, telling my whole life with his words, killing me softly with his song. Bling. I'll have to practice that. Roberta started out teaching public school music. As did your mom. Oh, I love your mom. Rest in power, Mama. Oh, I love you guys. I love you. They call it the American Redoubt. Ooh. Well, it's a start, but I'm not breathing very well right now, so I gotta figure out my breathing. Breathe, Mama, breathe. Thank you for coming today. He did a handshake pull on Dump. Are you kidding me? Oh my God. Can we see it? Is it live? Is it live? Wait, I think I have something here. One new update. Whoa. Oh, Val! You're such a beautiful girl. Wait, we need a song.
Rocking round the lounge, shutting the fascists down. Finding love facts so fast, we make the fun times last at Lolo's Lounge.
Thank you, Val.
Lolo's Lounge. The best damn friends in the whole damn town. Rocking around around the lounge, shutting the fascists down, finding the facts so fast we make the fun times last. At Lolo's Lounge, the best damn friends in the whole damn town.
Oh, I have to sing again. Thank you, Val. That's so kind. You didn't need to do that. I'll pay you back when I see you next week. That would be a good song to play the ukulele on. I got to practice my ukulele today. Better than spending it on chocolate. Oh, Val, you're a love. I'll bring you some chocolate and that $1.99. She bought the 56 Chevy with her music teacher salary. That's beautiful. I love that story. All right. Thank you so much for coming and spending some of your morning and afternoon with me. Kind of, sort of. And I will see you guys. I'll see you guys. What is today? Today's Monday. I don't know if I'm going to do a space. I'm going to be honest with you. I got to think about that. I got to think about that. Thank you, for impromptu playing of The Stand last night. I really appreciate that. I was having I thought, oh, they mentioned it at the lounge, and now I want to watch The Stand, and voila, there it was. So thank you for that. Tomorrow night is Documentary Tuesday, and we have 1,000 Cuts, which is a documentary about the Philippines and a journalist, and it's going to be fantastic. And you should check out the Discord. It'd be a good thing. Check out the Discord because it's really, really cool. Did you see Melanie duck a kiss from Trump at their big party? No, but I can only imagine. I can only imagine. All right. I'll see you guys later. Have a great whatever day this is, Monday. And I'll see you tomorrow morning if I don't see you.